Hey there! You might be wondering why I've locked myself in my living room for the past 2 months, eating nothing but noodles and drinking nothing but Pepsi Max Lime. Well, you might have guessed it by now, I've been going through Pixar's entire filmography, and what a batch of films they've cooked up over the last 26 years. Pixar is a studio I've been looking up to for a long time, ever since childhood, and when wondering what kind of episode to come back to after a 7-month gap, I decided to review their entire filmography. And it would be my pleasure to nerd out about each and every single one of their films for the next hour and a half. It's what I originally wrote in the script, until I edited it and realized that it's 3 hours long. Welcome back to Film to Watch with me! Oh, wait. Alright, that's better. Now, I feel the need to mention a few things before I start this video. At this point in the script, I've written all the way up to the Toy Story 4 review. First of all, carpal tunnel. Second, I realized that I am very, very nice to a lot of these films. And I'm going to keep it that way. Maybe it's the nostalgia of Pixar, maybe it's because I just connected to them a lot, but I am unapologetically nice to these films. Especially from Monsters, Inc. onwards. Not 2 onwards. There, trust me, oh my god, not 2 onwards. Maybe some of the praise for my favourite Pixar films aren't even all that deserved, but I don't care! Welcome to Film to Watch with me. It's hidden as a critique, but it's just not. Now, get out your history books, because we're going back to 1974, when a man named Alex Shaw established a small graphics team in the Lucasfilm computer division, which then span off into its own little studio a few years down the line. Fast forward to 1983. This little studio, now named Pixar, hires John Lasseter, who is brought on to help animate a short film, The Adventures of Andre and Wally B, in which they rip off Donald Duck. For a while, Pixar just released these animated shorts, until one day they dropped arguably the most important animated film of all time. An animated film called Toy Story. Holy shit, it really is just Toy Story, isn't it? Toy Story was released on November 22nd, 1995, and was the first fully 3D animated feature to release in cinemas. That alone gives this film legs to stand on, and also a crutch to lean on in case it twists its angle, which, well, it does. Sometimes. The animation has aged. Obviously. It's not bad, far from it. In fact, I was surprised by how nice it looks even today. But you can very easily tell that Pixar didn't exactly have all the kinks figured out just yet. And that 3D animation to the scale was still a new batch of problems to work through. That, and this was released in 1995. Of course it's going to look old. And some scenes today look,
Buzz, look, an alien! Where?
creepy. Character movements looks off, lighting is basic and looks good at best, and the faces— okay, stop! There's a scene around the 44 minutes mark where Sid is burning Woody's head, and is it just me or does this look really off? I'm no animation expert though, so to any animators watching this, am I the only one that noticed that this looks kind of off? Or am I just stupid? Maybe it's just the lighting or the way it's animated, but it takes me out of the scene every time I see it. The last big complaint with the animation is the staging? Is that what you call it? At the gas station, for example, the background looks empty, vast. Like someone turned their render distance down and are seeing the fog. Same scene, different issue. In this bird's eye view shot of the gas station, these buildings look like they were ripped right out of GTA 3. So yeah, the animation is old. However, despite its very clear age, I still think the movie has good animation. I was honestly surprised at how well it stood up today. Yeah, none of it's really amazing anymore, but this wasn't a step for 3D animation. This was a fucking leap. While some characters move like Minecraft skeletons, others show movement so fluid it makes you want to see the animators in action.
Hey, X, draw. Oh! Got me again.
While this doesn't have much to do with the animation itself, the character designs are iconic as hell. Everyone who watches this film remembers Buzz and Woody's design. I'm no expert on this stuff, so I'm going to stop commenting on it here, but the bottom line is that Toy Story has fun, colourful, and interesting designs all around that stick out in your head more than, well, any other Pixar franchise. Seriously, the only movies that get anywhere close to the amazing character designs is WALL-E and Up. And technically Cars, but that movie's designs stick out in my head for other reasons. So how come this film is seen as such a classic today when the animation has aged so poorly? Well, every scene in this film is memorable, and that comes down to great characters, great pacing, and great dialogue. The opening scenes establish the characters' wants and desires masterfully. From the second Woody and the other toys start moving and talking, it's clear that this is a film about toys who have life. Woody and Slinky play checkers together, they have inside jokes with one another, and they all share a common interest that they want to be played with by children, in this case Andy. And we see very early on that there is a real fear among these toys about being replaced and never played with again. But Woody? Nah, dude's a cowboy, everybody loves him, so he has nothing to worry about. Yes, replacement. For a film about toys coming to life, these themes are surprisingly mature. I mean, no kid is going to be worried about being replaced. But the parents? The parents sure are. I need those documents on my desk by Friday, Sally. But it makes the film's script work. You understand that these are toys and that they want to be played with. You understand why Woody, who we see is really close to Andy, gets jealous so easily. And you understand that this fucking space twat coming in unannounced would kinda piss him off. Clearly, this is a story that couldn't be done without the medium of animation, and it's done nearly perfectly. Nearly perfectly. Where this film does fault is in its characterization. Specifically, Woody. I said just moments ago that it's understandable why he gets jealous, but you can have a character getting jealous without making them as much of an asshole as Woody is. And it gets harder and harder to root for this guy every time I rewatch this film. The only redeeming quality is Buzz, who I think was characterized really well. While Space Ranger Buzz can get kind of annoying sometimes, by the end he ended up being one of my favorite characters in the film. Despite how obnoxious he was in the first 3 quarters, the most interesting storyline is seeing Buzz transition from crashed Space Marine to just a toy, an idea he struggles but comes to terms with in the last act. It just sucks that throughout that transition he sat next to the guy that punches him in the crotch every 15 seconds. So where do I stand on this film? While the animation is clearly aged, I think the writing keeps it really interesting and very rewatchable to this day. However, the animation has aged. I don't have too much of a problem with it, but I'm not going to start hailing Toy Story as a prime piece of steak of cinema that I see a lot of others do. The animation is great. For 1995, to today's standards, it's a bit hard on the eyes. And while that's understandable, it's still a broken limb. Again, I really do love this film, but only really for the writing and the charm of the old animation. I like this film more as a core component to the film's industry's progression than an actual animated feature I can rewatch. Again though, it is still a great film, and if you're gonna start watching any animated films, Toy Story is the one to go for. In 1994, Pixar's story department was wondering what to do after Toy Story. This neat little idea about an ant came up in conversation while some absolute legends were eating lunch. Andrew Stanton, Joe Ranft, and Pete Docter. Oh, and I guess John Lasseter was there, but you know. When people think of Pixar films, A Bug's Life is usually forgotten. And for good reason. While A Bug's Life did well in the box office and critics gave it high reviews, a lot of viewers, including myself, don't really see why, because to put it simply, it's just kind of there. Starting with the positives, it's got great animation compared to Toy Story. From the moment the film starts, the animation already looks better, especially in the environment. Every time I see the Bug City, I have to remind myself that the film before it had Nintendo 64 buildings. Character movements are more fluid, the lip sync animation looks, better, I guess. And my favorite part of the visuals was the lighting. I don't know how, but the lighting takes the cake for this film. Again, is it amazing to today's standards? Hell no, but it's an instant improvement over their first film. One small, incy problem with the animation, though. The character designs. They are, how do I put this lightly, fucking boring. I don't really blame this on the character designers, more so on the fact that, well, they're bugs. More specifically, ants. But you could replace the main character, Flick, with any of these worker ants designs and it would not change anything. That's not to say that there aren't good designs. The circus troupe has some characters that really stick out in my head, like Francis, Heimlich, and Tuck and Roll. They also have some characters that don't, like the rest. Hey, wanna know what's just as boring as these designs? The story is fine. Grasshoppers steal food from the ants, and Ant goes to find bugs to fight the grasshoppers. Turns out they are circus bugs that confuses a battle for a gig. They paint fences to learn karate, find the Holy Grail, create Armageddon, beat the grasshoppers, you get it. Basic story beats. But the pacing is so sluggish. Pun intended. When rewatching through this film while taking notes the second time around, I was constantly fast forwarding to get to the next plot point. There's just not much keeping me in these scenes sometimes. That's not to say there are no highlights. Flick setting off on his journey is the most beautiful scene in the film, in large part because of the music, but the visuals stand out here too. The rest is just kinda meh. Characters are pretty one-note, there's no heavy themes, none that I really care for anyway, and there's nothing happening in this story to keep me watching. On top of that, oh no, the main character lied. Guess we all have to be mad at him. Cliché. I'm saying there are parts that are cliché. The voice actors, however... Well, this film has a really nice cast. Dave Foley does a great job portraying Flick. The awkwardness and desperation in his voice is really well done. Julia Dreyfus does an equally amazing job as Princess Atta. And, then there's... Oh no! All, jokes aside, he does a really good job as Hopper. He's scary, he's violent, he sounds like if you looked at him the wrong way, he would beat you within an inch of your life. I've got no complaints on the voice acting. Is it as good as Toy Story? No, but is it a good film? Yes. Kinda. Just barely? Maybe it's because the films before and after this are so good that I don't see the beauty of this release, which there very well might be, but as it stands right now, I do not care for this film. And probably never will. I do, however, care about... So here's a really sweet story I found on Wikipedia. A few days after the release of Toy Story, John Lasseter was traveling with his family and found a young boy holding a Sheriff Woody doll at an airport. He described how the boy's excitement to show it to his father really touched him. He realized that this was no longer his character, it was thousands of others who were touched by the film's characters and story. This experience played a large role in the story for the sequel, Toy Story 2, which released on the 13th of November 1999 to, get this, critical acclaim. From a technical standpoint, the visuals look twice as good as the films that preceded it. The movement of the characters is vastly improved, with character motions being so incredibly fluid and expressive. I love how they animated Buzz and Woody in the opening scene. It has so much motion while keeping it different between the two characters. Example, Woody is a doll, and so his arms and legs flail about more. Buzz is simply built different though, literally. He's made out of plastic, so his movement is stiffer compared to every other character. There were hints of these toys moving differently depending on their material in the first film, but probably due to computer power at the time, they all moved basically the same. In this film though, the toys move a lot more as you would expect them to. Talking about that first scene, yes? Yes. I don't know a single person that doesn't love the opening of Toy Story 2, being one of the most memorable scenes in Pixar's filmography. Being a kid and watching this, I was instantly hooked in because the spaceman was blowing shit up and kicking ass. Let's go, let's fucking go! The animation made this scene what it is, showing instant improvement and spectacle. If this was a flex, I respect it. The lighting, textures, and lip sync are also improved on a ton. No longer are we getting this nightmare fuel on our screens. The human designs got so much better as well. They looked fine before, but damn, everyone got a glow up. Want to relax your eyes in one of Pixar's many luxury locations? Why not kick up your feet in Andy's room with 3 luxurious shelves, large toy chest for storage, and a door? Oh, a child's bedroom isn't your thing? Don't blame you. How about Al's Toy Barn? Did you see the Bugs Life toys? Ooh. Then take a ride in the back of Al's trunk. Seriously, get in there. Get the fuck in there. Get in there! The environments are really good, and they all have great atmosphere, especially every scene at the airport. Again, the animation has clearly aged. We've made films that look 3 times as good now, but this film's visuals to this day are wonderful to the eyes and a joy to sit through. Now, I don't know if this is an unpopular opinion judging by the film's IMDb reviews, but I think this film is leagues better than its first counterpart. Not just for the animation, but for everything else as well. Honestly, Toy Story? Replacement is a good theme, but it's just not that interesting to me, personally. Abandonment, however, Maybe it's just because I feared abandonment more than being replaced, because A, I'm 18 and don't have what my parents consider a job, and B, I'm not a computer from 2003 running Windows XP, but the theme of abandonment just hit way closer to home for me. And the way they explore that theme is amazing. Cutting to the chase, also spoilers. Woody debating leaving Andy and the other toys to give these new toys a chance at happiness, while also acting as an opportunity to solidify his place in history, is an incredible turning point in the story, and I bet is relatable to most viewers. I think everyone has a fear of how they'll be remembered or for how long, and how their lives would have made an impact. Woody and the other toys of the Roundup gang have an opportunity to be remembered forever. Behind glass. The alternative is to be loved by those close to you for the short time you have with them. And I think if Woody picked either of these options, I wouldn't blame him, especially in the way they presented them. Woody's lapse in judgment is not only dramatic and entertaining, but it's ironically incredibly human. Seeing him struggle to make the decision is somehow more interesting than any other scene in the entire series. Obligatory "when somebody loved me" mention, many find this to be the most beautiful scene Pixar has ever put out, and I can kind of agree. You get to see all these different experiences and how they play into abandonment, with a beautiful piece from Sarah McLachlan playing in the background. This film's message hits hard and I love it. The characters are also fire. Woody is no longer an asshole, and even when you think the film is setting him up to look like one, you know that the other characters haven't seen everything. On top of that, so many of the toys that were made unimportant after the first act of Toy Story 1 are now joining in on the adventure, and while they get nowhere near the same spotlight as Woody or Buzz, they are a very welcome addition. Also, this is the funniest Toy Story film, bar none. There are so many jokes, both visual gags and spoken word. I am in heaven. I remember a 6-year-old Jackintosh laughing his ass off every time this funny potato man got his foot stuck in some gum as a cylinder the size of Moby Huge rolls to crush him, and he fucking waddles off. Is the scene really that funny? No, most I get now is a smirk, but there are so many more hilarious little jokes in this thing.
What's that? Jesse and Prospector are trapped in the old abandoned mine, and Prospector just lit a stick of dynamite thinking it was a candle, and now they're about to be blown to smithereens?
It might just be the nostalgia, since this was really the only Toy Story I watched when I was a kid, as I didn't even watch the first one until a few years back, but I think this is leagues better than its predecessor. Heavily improved animation, a much better script, some wonderful voice acting, and building up on the foundation that the last film set up. This is everything a sequel should be. This is not just one of my favorite Pixar films, but one of my all-time favorite sequels. Easy S-tier piece of cinema. Remember that lunch where A Bug's Life was created? Well, among the Subway BLTs and chicken tenders that hung in the desert air came an idea about monsters. Some guy who seems to have disappeared from my script created the first treatment of what was codenamed Hidden City. After pitching it to the Disney executives, leaving with some suggestions and a new name, Monsters Inc., and returning with a refined draft, Pixar got to work on their new film, led by... Wait, is that... Pete Docter? My Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ! Monsters Inc. released in cinemas on November 2nd, 2001. To say the film was a success would be an understatement, as it generated over $500 million total and received high acclaim everywhere. The question is the film good? Yes! The plot of Monsters Inc. is, and I mean this with 100% honesty, one of the most unique concepts for a film I have ever seen. A world of monsters that gets power by scaring human children is a great setting, but adding in the human child that they believe to be toxic, creating a menace and two monsters trying to keep her under wraps is a great setup. It's probably why this film sticks out in my head so much, more than any other Pixar film. Well, that, and Monsters Inc. is fucking hilarious. Visual gags are plentiful here, and I pin it up to the diversity of the monster designs and how the animators use them. This is the most cartoony film in Pixar's filmography at this point, and they wouldn't release another film that's this hilarious in its visual gags until WALL-E, 7 years later. There's just so much comedy in this film, and I feel stupid saying this scene and that scene, so just here's a 6-second montage.
Get up, Sully! Did the whole family see it? It's your mom.
Bones.
Now close.
No, don't worry. It's lemon.
It's just, you can't top this! To make this film even better, Mike and Sully are some of the best characters to have come out of Pixar, and the best buddy characters out of their entire filmography, bar none. Continuing on the subject of comedy, I have not laughed this hard at two characters just talking while walking down the street since... well, basically ever, since that's a really specific scenario, but my point is that these characters have the funniest one-liners I've ever had the pleasure of sitting through. Talking about the visuals, though... well, once again, age! Fur especially looks primitive, textures look outdated, and just looking at it you think, well, this was very pre-Cars 2. The biggest props I can give to the animation are to the fluidity of the characters, which was the best Pixar had put out so far. That and the character expressions are amazing. And you know what? Props to the writers for not only making these characters funny, but also an enjoyable duo with a friendship that is tested throughout the film, with a payoff that feels earned. In the locker room scene, wow, that sounds fucking weird out of context, we learn a ton about the world and the aspirations of the characters naturally through some great dialogue. But the exposition doesn't feel forced. It feels like two competitive employees excited about being the best in their field. We learn that this is important, especially to Mike, and throughout the rest of the film, Mike's aspirations are challenged by Sully after he finds a human child and tries to get her home instead of just ditching her somewhere, putting them both in risk of not only losing the scare record, but getting banished as well. Fuck! It's good! It's amazing! God, I love this film's story, it's perfect! Just like its voice cast. I was wondering where I recognized Sullivan's voice from while rewatching this film. As it turns out, it was Speed Racer. Hey John Goodman, great film, and the perfect choice for Sullivan. Not because of Speed Racer, he's just a good fit for a big blue bear that scares kids. That's supposed to be a compliment. Anyway, Billy Crystal's energy is on point with Mike Wazowski. He lands his one-liners incredibly well and is probably the reason why his character is so memorable, and quotable, and memeable. Great choice. I'm just gonna lightning round the rest of these. Steve Buscemi's role of Randall is on point and is one of my favorite villain voice actors in Pixar's filmography. However, James Coburn is a runner-up for that title, as his voice for Waternoose paired with the design is equally as perfect. Jennifer Tilly Celia has the perfect energy, just like Billy Crystal. Bob Peterson is Roz. What else do I have to talk about? Oh, right. While other Pixar films have incredible soundtracks, Monsters Inc. is the first one of their films that got me from, yeah, the soundtrack is pretty great, to, while writing this script, I had the entire soundtrack on a loop and I've never been happier. You might have noticed that I never really got into the soundtracks before now, and that's because while those films do have great soundtracks, Monsters Inc. is the first one of them to really blow me away. That's right, I don't really care if you've got a friend in me. Yes, I am evil. Randy took a more jazzy approach this time, which fits perfectly. Tracks like The Scare Floor, Walk to Work, and Monsters Inc. show this off best. While we're here though, Monsters Inc. is hands down the best fucking intro theme for any Pixar film. It's definitely turned into a meme recently, but so did Ocean Man, and that song slaps. The Ride of the Doors is a damn masterpiece. This Ocean of Doors would not have the impact it does without the strings and brass in the background. Boo's Going Home is so beautiful. I don't usually cry at films, but half the reason I tear about the scene at all is due to this beautiful piece that perfectly captures the bittersweet emotions of Sully. Boo is a cube. This soundtrack is one of the best in a Pixar film, and the film as a whole is one of the best so far. Also, if I didn't have you, kicks your other friend and me into the dirt. Fuck you. Up to this point, Pixar had released 4 films, all of which built the foundation for 3D animated features going forward, but also knocked down any preconceptions of the quality of that new medium. However, this was still a new medium, and many of the studios were trying to dip their toes into the water, such as DreamWorks, Nickelodeon, and Blue Sky. But around that time, those films have aged in one way or another. For example, Monsters Inc., a great looking film, but some parts like the hair on Sully's body haven't aged all too well. That's why I called this segment the early days, because it's not only when Pixar was trying to figure out the medium themselves, but so were other studios. Every single one of these films from each different studio around this time aged in one way or another. Until one didn't, and surprise surprise, it was a Pixar film. Finding Nemo began pre-production in 1997, with the film's director Andrew Stanton writing the film during the post-production of A Bug's Life. He took huge inspiration from past experiences, going to the dentist and seeing the fish tank, wondering if the fish wanted to escape back home, taking a trip to Marine World, and being way too overprotective of his son while taking him on a walk in the park. All themes and ideas that play a big role in this film. On May 30th, 2003, Finding Nemo released in theaters to critical acclaim. This film is nearly 2 months older than me, but unlike me, this film has aged incredibly well, and is the first Pixar film to have what I consider to be timeless animation. Even to this day, some of the most iconic and beautiful shots from Pixar are from Finding Nemo. Oh my god. Every rewatch of this film, I get surprised that it released 19 years ago. And somehow, the atmosphere is still some of the best in animation to this day. For a film that takes place in the Big Blue, there's a lot of variety when it comes to colors and lighting. Like, dark blue, and light blue, and, turquoise, and green, and pink, and yellow, and orange, and whale. The drop-off, essentially just the ocean, has such a threatening atmosphere to it, but I don't have the chills because it's wet and cold. No, it mainly comes down to the lighting, or I guess the shading of the ocean, and the absolute endlessness we see. See, get it? Same goes for the inside of a whale. Decidedly a tad bit more terrifying if I were in that situation, though I would wonder how I'd even still be alive at that point. This acts as one of the emotional points of the film, where Marlin confronts his overprotectiveness of not only his son, but others as well. The dark insides of a whale is, oddly enough, the perfect location for this. One of the scenes I remembered most as a kid was the inside of the tank's filter, which sounds weird, but the animators made it the most claustrophobic location in the entire film. I mean, the inside of a filter inside of a fish tank is about the furthest you could get away from the ocean, right? The ocean that Nemo is desperate to get home to. Now, not to sound like your Year 9 English teacher or anything, but the filter as a set is a great representation of Nemo's fears of not being able to go home, blocked in away from others, with a spinning blade and a green aura. Seeing Nemo return to this location and overcome his fears is incredibly satisfying, as is the rest of the script. One thing Finding Nemo is great at is switching between the funniest fish puns in cinema history and, somehow, some genuinely heartbreaking and dramatic moments. This film is by far the most childish in terms of its humor. I mean...
He said it was called, a butt. Wow, that's a pretty big butt.
Okay, it's pretty funny. But it also has some dramatic, tense, and sad moments. Finding Nemo ties with Monsters, Inc. and Toy Story 3 for having the most heartwarming final scenes in Pixar's entire filmography. I feel genuine joy every time I watch Marlin and Nemo meet up with each other, and every second after that is the perfect combination of Marlin and Nemo's character development, wrapping things up with a scene that even references a piece of dialogue from earlier in the film. Honestly, I only have a few negatives with the script. Some of these characters are not utilized as much as they could have been. The Fish Tank Gang is a good example. There's a full cast, all with their own personalities, but they are really just here to ease Nemo into the fish tank. The only really important one is Gil, who's voiced by Willem Dafoe. The rest are memorable, but don't do all too much. Even by the second film, they are reduced to nothing but a small gag in an after-credits scene. Everything else, though? Yeah, it's great. I can't end this review without talking about the music. From Finding Nemo onward, Randy Newman was no longer the only composer for Pixar. While he is still composing for them, Finding Nemo's soundtrack was taken on by none other than Randy's cousin, Thomas Newman. Now, Thomas is a fucking legend. For his first soundtrack for Pixar, he knocked it right out of the ballpark, creating a soundtrack that is tense, sad, calming, and beautiful all in one. Nemo Egg is one of the most gorgeous openings I've ever heard. Paired with the visuals is one of the most gorgeous openings I've ever seen. Short-term Dory is fast, tense, and quirky. I swear I mean that in a good way. And while it wasn't produced by Thomas, Beyond the Sea by Robbie Williams is the perfect closer for Finding Nemo. Great soundtrack, great writing, great animation, great film. Footnote time! When you were a kid and you went to a fish shop or aquarium and saw a clownfish, did you ever... Found him! The Incredibles is a bit different from the first 5 films in this list. The first reason is that this was directed by Brad Bird, Pixar's first outside director. He was the director for the film The Iron Giant, which sadly bombed in the box office. Due to this and his dissatisfaction from Warner Media, he pitched the idea of a family of superheroes to Pixar. Safe to say, John Lasseter loved the idea. Second, it's a hell of a lot more mature in its themes than the previous films, and in its story beats. A good example would be a character trying to kill himself in the first scene alone. Kids film, you say? It was the longest Pixar film when it released, clocking in at nearly 2 hours long. Only 2 other Pixar films have surpassed it, The Incredibles 2 being 2 minutes and 45 seconds longer, and Cars by 76 seconds. And last but not least, all of the main characters are human for the first time. They even had to create new technology to animate human anatomy, clothing, and realistic features like skin and hair. And you know what? For their first proper attempt at making a film entirely with humans, they did an incredible job. I'm sure that's the first time you've heard that joke. But in all seriousness, Pixar hit it out the fucking ballpark with the animation. I admittedly don't think it comes anywhere close to Finding Nemo, but Finding Nemo is cartoony fish. Of course they're going to be easier to animate and therefore are more likely to age better. And even then, The Incredibles has aged quite well with its animation, and I feel like that comes down to a reason that I'm sure many gamers will be upset about. It's cartoony. Yes, please hold your applause for this revelation about a cartoon being a cartoon, but what I mean is that they could have taken a much more realistic route when dealing with human characters and the world, but they keep it in that cartoony style and it works in its favor. Not to say a realistic style can't work, in fact their later film Soul takes a much more realistic approach, for the most part, and it looks... You know what, I will gush about that later. The visual style of The Incredibles is amazing from both a general visual standpoint and within its own context, since the film takes place in the 1960s, taking after comic book superheroes from around that time. But they never say, oh, it's the 1960s. They show it in the sets, the environment of the city, the computers without making it too on the nose. The cold open for the film has an old static effect. The police cars use designs from that era. The Incredibles is the perfect example of show don't tell in terms of establishing its world. It's also just eye candy. No, it's not as gracious as Finding Nemo, and it hasn't really aged as well in my opinion, but just like Finding Nemo, it uses a lot of elements of animation that make it one of the best animated films of all time. Squash and stretch, while not used much in their previous endeavors, is abundant in The Incredibles, and it really helps emphasize movement, which, believe it or not, is really important for a superhero film. Helen Parr, aka Elastigirl, benefits the most from this. I mean, that's basically her power, squash and stretch. But even then, it's well done. No, it's not because of her ass! Not entirely, anyway. Dash gets a similar treatment with smear frames, giving whenever he runs a cool little effect. Speaking of which, special effects are also fucking amazing! Explosions and gunshots look fantastic, turning an action scene from an incredibly well-animated fight with cool moves and neat attacks, to cool fighting moves and neat attacks with explosions and gunshots. Which, last time I did the math, is an instant recipe for success. Admittedly though, some things have aged better than others. Hair is something they didn't exactly perfect, though I obviously blame that on the tech at the time. Watching the behind the scenes video on the animation, you can tell that the hair was probably the biggest pain when it came to animating the characters. And even then, at times, it looks great. Other times it looks not as great. Violet is the biggest offender of this problem though, and considering practically all of the shots of the animators talking about figuring out the hair include tests of her, it's safe to say she was the hardest to get right. The rest of the negatives in its animation comes down simply to age. Fish, toys, or monsters are much easier to animate most of the time due to how non-human they are, meaning they will most likely age better. And yeah, that's what happened. Animating humans, while clearly in good reach at the time, still shows its age every now and again. Despite that, the animation is still amazing. Not timeless, but still a great effort from the animation team. What has remained timeless, however, is the story. While this is by no means the funniest or most dramatic Pixar release, it was and still is the most action-packed. Some of these scenes are amazing, but they aren't just done because action scene cool, no! Brad Bird knows better than that. The opening scene, yes I count this as an action scene, in which Mr. Incredible saves a cat and stops a gang of robbers at the same time is opened by the line,
"Yeah, I've got time."
And he repeats this almost constantly in the opening, putting off his fucking wedding to save the city, showing off a very important character trait of Mr. Incredible. That he wants to live in glory saving people. The jungle fight shows Dash's and Violet's development as not only learning to control and use their powers in useful ways, but how they've grown as a team. Even combining their powers at the end to escape from one dude. I mean, they could just run him over like a fucking bowling pin, but you know. The final fight between the Incredibles team and the Omnidroid, that's what it's called by the way, the Omnidroid, what a fucking cool name, is not only one of the coolest fight scenes in animation history, but is also the culmination of all the character development in the film. Oh, and
Where's my super suit?
yeah, good line. I can't end this review without talking about the voice acting and the music, though I'll keep it brief. The voice acting is some of the best in a Pixar film. Craig T. Nelson is the perfect fit for Bob. deep enough to accommodate for Bob's build while still nailing some of the more somber scenes. Holly Hunter is probably my favorite voice actor in the film, playing the role of Helen. She nails every emotion. I get chills hearing her voice raise when Bob and her are arguing. It's terrifying. Spencer Fox and Sarah Vowell capture the voices of Dash and Violet perfectly. And you know what? I've never been afraid of fucked up nerds until I heard the character of Syndrome, and Jason Lee is a part of why that is. And, well, Lucius is voiced by Samuel L. Jackson. Do I need to say anything else? Also, rest in peace, Jean Sincere. The last thing she starred in was a fucking iCarly episode. Finally, the music. Once again, Randy Newman doesn't appear for this film, and neither does Thomas, or any of the Newman family. No, this time we've got Michael Giacchino on the soundtrack. Checking Michael's scoring work, I didn't realize how many of my favorite soundtracks were composed by this guy. I mean, Speed Racer has a killer soundtrack, Gravity Falls slaps when it needs to, and the same year The Incredibles released, so did Shark Tale. Okay, so he's got an impressive catalogue of soundtracks, but what about The Incredibles? Well... 10 out of 10, this movie and its soundtrack is a 10 out of 10. Brad Bird, you fucking legend, I will kiss you! Hey, could I tell you two something? What is it, son? Mom, Dad, I'm gay. Oh, don't worry, son. I'm gay too. Sweetie, of course we accept you. Oh, really? That's amazing! Hey, to celebrate, do you want to go watch Cars? I mean, he deserved it. I'm not accepting this language in my household. So, here's something that'll taint whatever I say for the rest of my life. I think Cars is alright. I guess that's not as big of a crime as I'm joking it is, but when it comes to the golden age of Pixar, Cars is kind of an anomaly. In fact, no one really knows what this fucking film is. For one, Pixar up to this point has a history of making films where the characters are non-human. Toys, fish, monsters, bugs, you get it. Something about these films, though, is that the character subjects from the get-go are interesting. Toys having minds of their own are interesting. Fish traveling across the ocean is interesting. Monsters interacting in a world similar yet still incredibly different from our own is interesting. Cars? Cars? There's no people here either. It is the cars with the life. I don't think it's the worst idea they could have gone with, it's just very... different. I mean, this thing's a conceptual nightmare. What are cars? Where did they come from? What is the inside of a car like? How do cars go to the bathroom? There are baby cars, so how do they reproduce? These cars are literally flashing McQueen, so that begs the question, do cars get horny? If they do, is there car porn? Where is the Rule 34 stash of Mater? I know you're hiding it, Lasseter! Case in point, we don't know how this world works, and we don't learn all too much about it. And we don't learn anything, because I don't think the writers knew how this world works either. Cars, from the day it started production, was doomed to be bad, as it had an unexplained and underdeveloped world, with a subject matter that I and many others simply didn't care about. Cars is a bad franchise. So, how come this first film was kind of decent?
Oh yeah, lightning's ready.
I'll admit, nostalgia hits hard the second Real Gone starts playing, but there's more than just some good visuals and a kick-ass tune. There's a genuinely good story to be told. One of the few things Cars gets right is its themes. I mean, if you're going to make a story about cars, then the theme of slowing down every now and again is kind of obvious. Not that that's a bad thing, far from it, because it's this film's strongest writing trait. And our lead character, Lightning McQueen being a hotshot race car, is the perfect character for this theme. After being separated from his truck driver Mac, and breaking a few union work laws to get there, McQueen finds himself trapped in Radiator Springs, a small town on Route 66 which he accidentally wrecks and is forced to stay and fix the road he damaged. He meets the residents of Radiator Springs, befriends a tow truck, gets with a Porsche named Sally, earns the respect of the Hudson Hornet, and right when he has the opportunity to win, he stops. Goes back, and saves a half-destroyed, turned-over Strips Weathers from losing his final race, taking the L himself. Now this is... good. It's by far the most disappointing story by Pixar, only maybe tied with A Bug's Life, but on its own it's well told and generally enjoyable to watch. However, the concept of the cars themselves kind of pushes this down. Not only because the cars and the world they inhabit is just not explained or barely explored, but also because I am not interested in the views and opinions of fucking cars. I do not care. I don't know many people that care about if a car is happy or not, or what emotional crap a car is going through. It's not an interesting topic like toys or bugs or monsters. It is a car. And that dampers what would be a potentially good story to, at best, a mediocre one. On top of that, the pacing is a little off, ironically, and this film is way too long. I said it before, but this is slightly longer than The Incredibles. The Incredibles has so much more story though, it feels like something is actually happening. The side characters in Cars are annoying as all crap too. There isn't a single one I found funny or interesting, and they just hindered the story even more. Okay, but the animation is still really good. I'm not gonna sit here and pretend that it tops The Incredibles or Finding Nemo, because it fucking doesn't. But as it stands, yeah, I like it. I especially love the first 15 minutes at the racetrack. The first time we see McQueen is just...
Oh yeah, lightning's ready.
Once again, nostalgia hits kinda hard here, but there's something about the animation of this film that is incredibly appealing, and it's all shown off in the first scene. The cars are almost squishy for some reason, but it works in the film's favor, allowing the characters to be a hell of a lot more expressive than they would be otherwise. The lighting is also surprisingly well done, with the flashing lights and the reflections on the different racers. Even the special effects are good. Seeing McQueen drive through the smoke got me on the edge of my seat when I was a kid, and while it has nowhere near the same effect it did back then, it's still a cool looking scene. The last part of the visuals I need to mention, or else I'd be put down via Mater's hook, is some of the scenery. As much as I dislike the inhabitants of Radiator Springs, the town itself and surrounding area is straight up gorgeous. I won't lie and say it's the best Pixar has done, but as it stands, there are some beautiful shots that make dealing with the annoying characters and odd plots all worth it. You can tell there was a lot of love from the crew to go through the effort to make this look as good as it does. Finally, I want to quickly talk about the music. Out of all the films Randy Newman could have returned to, for some reason it was Cars. And yeah, surprise surprise that his score is the best part of the soundtrack, but the outside song picks are equally as great. Route 66 is a perfect fit for the scene it's in. Shaboom could fit any scene in this film like a glove. And Life is a Highway? God, I don't have words. It's perfect. It's like it's kickstarting the script. I love it. Okay. Very last thing I need to mention, I promise. Some of the sound is amazing. Example A. That's all you need to hear. So what is this film to me? It just barely scrapes the mark of good, so why have I talked about it so much compared to other better Pixar films? I don't know, actually, so I'll try and answer the question another way. You know comfort films? Well, I think Cars is mine. It doesn't have to be good necessarily, but in terms of a film I can turn off my brain to and enjoy the best elements of, I think Cars is honestly one of the best. It's also very nostalgic. It's got a great score, some nice visuals, some weird but at times endearing writing, and you know what? That scene of McQueen and Sally taking a drive was kinda sweet. At the end of the day, I think Cars is a genuinely good film. Just an odd one. Also, I can't find them online, but do any of you remember the Cars branded chocolate cake bar things? I can't find them online and it's driving me crazy. Where the fuck are they? Hungry. Sure? Ugh, that tasted terrible. The last thing I want to think about is food. Ratatouille began development all the way back in the year 2000, when Jan Pinkover, the director of the Pixar short Jerry's Game, wrote the original concepts for the film. But in 2005, following his departure, Brad Bird took the role of director. And... well, safe to say I don't hate the change. While it sucks to not see the director of one of the most iconic Pixar shorts get his own shot at a feature film, Brad Bird was obviously going to give this story justice. And justice he gave it! Ratatouille, while not my favourite Pixar film, is easily one of the best. It has beautiful animation, incredible writing, and some of the best characters in a Pixar film. So, let's just go down that list. The last film that had a large focus on humans before Cars was The Incredibles. Unlike the slightly dated animation of that film, however, Ratatouille hasn't aged a day in its visuals. This comes down to two reasons. The first is that, well, technology just improved enough to the point where CGI animation could look that much better. The second is that, unlike the humans in Finding Nemo and Toy Story, the human characters are a lot more cartoony, as if they were originally intended to be in a 2D animated film. A good example would be Linguini, designed with a giant cartoony schnoz. Like, I hope this dude doesn't sniff in my direction or I am gone! But also his big eyes and noodle arms, the latter of which lets the animators treat him like an actual puppet, coinciding really well with the fact that a rat is treating him like one. Speaking of rats, it's not just humans that look amazing, it's fur and hair as well. I mean, considering half the film focuses on a rat and the hair said rat infests, it should look amazing, right? Yes. And it does. Considering that only 3 years earlier we were seeing this, and then jump to this. It's amazing to see the amount of progress the animation team had made in only a short amount of time. The textures look nicer, the movement is more fluid, and the lighting, holy crap, does the lighting look amazing! Some shots of Paris are downright stunning. If you don't want to watch this film for its story, then the beautiful visuals are plentiful. Luckily, you do want to watch this film for its story, because this has got to have one of the best scripts of all time. In Ratatouille, we follow Remy, a rat who, unlike the rest of his clan, doesn't want to steal trash to feast on. He wants to eat good food, and more than that, he wants to cook it. After being separated from his family, he finds himself in the sewers of Paris, right next to his favorite chef's old restaurant. From there, he meets an unskilled wannabe chef, learns to cook with him, and in the end, changes the mind of one of the most critical, critics in all of France. Obviously, there's a lot more in between that I missed, but the story beats themselves aren't what's important here, though they do play a role in making the story as good as it is. The themes are what drive this story to be amazing, and I feel as if it goes hand in hand with Pixar as a studio. One of Remy's biggest inspirations, Chef Gusteau, has a famous motto: anyone can cook. And that drives Remy, and by indirect extension Linguini, to take risks. While controlling Linguini, Remy is constantly going against Gusteau's own recipe, much to the disliking of another chef, Colette. But it works. Everyone loves Remy's cooking. Anyone can cook. Or can they? Linguini can't, and he's the son of Gusteau, and he doesn't learn either. Linguini still can't cook by the end of the film. Instead, he's a simple waiter on roller skates. And yet, he's happy, he's content with his role in the kitchen. Admittedly, I was a bit confused after seeing this film for the first time. Remy got his dream, he had the opportunity to cook in a gourmet kitchen and experiment with his dishes, and by the end, he still gets to do that. But Linguini can't. Hell, the rat says the noodle man can't cook, and by the end he doesn't. On paper, this shouldn't work. The themes of anyone can cook or anyone can follow their dreams clash with Linguini as a character. But through the course of the film, we get, as Ego puts it, a new perspective. Not everyone can cook, but a good cook can come from anywhere. While Linguini isn't a renowned chef, he's happy with the role he plays. An important role that he shines at. And Remy, someone who at face value would be the opposite of a chef considering his species, turns out to be pretty good at it. This reminds me of two films later in Pixar's filmography. The first is Monsters University, a not very amazing film, but one that shares a similar theme, and is the strongest part of it. The second is the barbershop scene in Soul. We'll get to those later though. The story of Ratatouille is the strongest part of the film, and one of the most mature and spectacular stories Pixar had created at this point. It's grand, it's gorgeous, and it's inspiring. My terrible writing and awful voiceover cannot do this film justice. Ratatouille is... oh, what's that word? Oh yeah! Cinema! Ratatouille is cinema, and some of the best of it. It's beautiful visually, it's incredibly well written, and it's inspiring. It is one of the best Pixar films to date. You'll need to excuse me for this part of the video, as this is by far the longest review I've written about a Pixar film. It doesn't need to be the longest, but I made this video to gush about great Pixar films and complain about the crap ones, and WALL-E is just amazing. And to me, that probably comes down to the fact that it kinda itches all my rashes. What kind of a fucking saying is that? I'm a sucker for the sci-fi genre, for one. The game I've sunk the most hours into over the last few years is Elite Dangerous, and one of my favorite shows was Final Space. Hashtag renew Final Space, by the way. On top of this film being a sci-fi, it's also arguably the most artsy film they'd put out up to this point, having the first 30 minutes with practically no dialogue. Yet it still tells its story masterfully. And I like that, because you see, I'm very smart and not stupid at all. Anyway, onto the actual review. WALL-E is a 2008 sci-fi epic directed by Andrew Stanton. We follow the titular character, WALL-E, a lonely waste removal robot left on Earth by humans that have long since escaped the planet due to rising toxicity. The film's concept came around at that lunch in 1995, but the story's development was put on hold due to a lack of ideas. But by the end of Stanton's first Pixar film, Finding Nemo, he went back to writing and got to work on what we know today as WALL-E. Alright, enough backstory. WALL-E has my favourite script of any Pixar film, scratch that, of any animated film. In fact, this script is so good that half of this review is going to be me talking about it. And if you haven't seen the length of this in the chapters yet, then, well, you might want to grab some popcorn or something, because I'm going to be picking this apart like it's a game of Operation. Okay, more like a game of rock, paper, scissors. I don't think there's a film that establishes its world, its characters, their motivations, and backstory as good as WALL-E does in its first 10 minutes. We open on different shots of space before cutting to Earth, which is looking a little messy. The planet is surrounded by space tech and debris, while the surface itself is brown and dull. Panning in, we see our world filled with trash, not a soul to be seen. Until we see one. A lonely robot struts down the road playing cheery music to himself. But, well, why is a robot playing music to itself? And why is it taking and storing a trash lid? We learn that this robot's job is to turn trash into more compact cubes, so why is he going home when he sees the sunset? There's clearly a lot of rubbish here, shouldn't he just be continuing his job? Clearly, this isn't any normal robot. At his home, we see trinkets, trophies, tapes, and other items that don't begin with the letter T, like a toaster. Ah, shit. While out doing his day job, WALL-E collects things he finds interesting. At sundown, he takes them home, watches his favorite film, and goes to bed, rocking himself to sleep. From the first 10 minutes, we pick up that WALL-E isn't just a cold, trash-crushing machine. He's a cold, trash-crushing machine that has and feels emotions. He feels joy at collecting different oddities, he gets panicked when he accidentally runs over his friend, and he feels envious towards the characters in his favorite film. Just like the characters he's watching, he wants love, he wants a connection, and he wants more to life than just what he was programmed to do. And we learn all this by watching. This is a robot that doesn't really speak with words. So we learn all this information through visual storytelling. The majority of WALL-E's emotions are shown through his eyes, but also his arm and body movement, and it's masterfully done. Presenting a lonely yet optimistic and bright-eyed character who dreams of more, and we see that. But that's not all. We learn about the world and how it turned from where we are today to where it is in this dystopian future. WALL-E's walk home tells us everything. That a big corporation called B&L offered luxury items and services to the point where said corporation and the world's inhabitants trash the planet. B&L is seen everywhere. An ultra store, a gas station, the bank, even the money is supplied by them. This delves more into the Pixar theory, but either way it supports my point. You can see the B&L brand in many other Pixar films and shorts. You can't escape the city, space, or even the film itself without seeing the logo plastered everywhere, setting up the first and biggest theme of WALL-E, consumerism. There's a great video by Pop Culture Detective that delves more into the themes and topics of WALL-E, and since I don't have the time to talk about them myself, I'm going to recommend you watch it. Later, you're giving me the attention right now. WALL-E presents its themes, main characters, and the characters' personalities perfectly. All shown in 10 minutes. No words, no text, just sounds, graphics, and story. It's fucking gorgeous. And then it gets better. Not only is WALL-E a space adventure juggling themes of corporate pollution, nostalgia, and environmentalism, but it's also a romance? And it's amazing? Every scene where WALL-E and another robot called Eve are interacting in is downright adorable, and I don't know many other films that have managed to top it. Granted, I don't watch many romances, if any, but that doesn't stop this relationship between two robots any less entertaining. The first date scene is hands down the funniest and cutest scene in Pixar's filmography, and through the rest of the film, you see a steady build-up of that relationship. Their journey on the Axiom, this giant-ass space cruiser, also owned by B&L, has got to have some of my favorite world building of any film. The introduction of the humans is great. We see these hover chairs from earlier in the film, used primarily by old people, and I would assume those with disabilities or something. Except when we see the ship present day, every single person is using them. There is not one human walking around on their legs. On top of that, they seem to have gained a bit of weight and lack a connection to the outside world. The second human we get to meet, Mary, gets disconnected from a call by Wally, and her first reaction is, well, confusion. Not necessarily at the call, but at everything else around her. She sees giant electronic billboards and advertising, followed by a rusty old robot. Now, if one person gets confused about where they've been for the last however old she is, how do you think most others on the Axiom would react? Probably the same, right? They seem to be aware of where they are, but they aren't too familiar with their actual surroundings. You'll never guess how this plays into the theme of corporations. The last act of the film shows the human race standing up and stepping away from B&L, the corporate entity that ruined their planet. It's a great scene, and the Axiom as a whole is a great critique on consumerism. Everyone is taking in so much of this fake crap that B&L is selling that they get complacent, even when their corporation is, deep down, really fucking evil. You know, like most corporations. Just like the ship's autopilot, which is a very smooth segue onto the last moment of this film. Now, I know this entire video has been one big spoiler after another, but I mean this. If you have not watched this film yet, leave. Go and watch it. Go start a trial on Disney+, go buy it online on Apple TV or YouTube or something. Go and buy the DVD or Blu-ray. I especially advise that last one, since you get bonus features, consistent quality, and just go and watch my physical releases video for more reasons. If you for some reason have not watched this film, go and watch it now, because I'm about to talk about my favorite ending for a Pixar film. And the last thing I want to do is ruin the experience. They all gone? You sure? Good. I fucking hate Terry anyway, and I knew he hadn't watched Wall-E. Yeah, sci-fi just isn't for me. Fuck off. So, very few films bring me to tears. Maybe it's just because I have too much testosterone in my strong, manly body that definitely does not look like a soggy noodle packet, but not many films with the intent to make me cry actually achieve that. In fact, it's sometimes the opposite. One of the best examples which I will gladly say brings me to tears every time I watch it is the final Race and Speed Racer. Don't worry, I will 100% be talking about that film in a different video at some point. I've already talked about it like twice in this video anyway. The other big one is Wall-E, and can you blame me? From the start of the film, we see that Wall-E is a weird robot, a more human robot. He feels emotions, he has wants, he has a personality, and that is what drives the story forward. Same could be said about Eve. While she is unlike Wall-E in form and function, she too has a personality. She gets frustrated when she can't do her tasks, she's ecstatic when she finds Wall-E in the plant safe. And she too has desires. It's what makes these two robots some of the most interesting characters in all of cinema, which makes the final scene so heartbreaking. When you see a crumpled up and destroyed Wall-E, when you see a distraught and panicked Eve desperate to fix him, and the final nail in the coffin, when she does, and Wall-E boots up. But he's not the Wall-E we know. He's a Wall-E unit, not Wall-E. He faces away from his first romance, he runs over his best friend without even flinching, and he crushes the treasures he collected like it was just any old piece of trash. So yeah, I cried a lot at this scene when I was a kid. This scene is heartbreaking, which is why I get so much genuine joy when, through a melancholic kiss, his eyes twitch, they shuffle, and the Wall-E unit turns back to Wall-E. And you know what? Call me a pussy all you want, I cry every single time I watch this scene without fail. While writing about this scene, I teared up, for God's sake. Wow, did he really? Past Jack's a fucking loser. This film brings me to tears every time I watch it, without fail. And I couldn't be happier for that to be the case. It's at this point in the video where I feel like Pixar, at least for now, has peaked with its animation, so for the rest of these reviews, just assume the animation is great, even to today's standards. If there's ever a point I have to make on the animation, I will, and don't worry, we will get there. I leave this note on Wall-E though because I still have something to say about it. While the animation I feel is on par with Ratatouille, I think it does something much better. Visual storytelling. Oh, and it has some really beautiful backgrounds. Not to say Ratatouille didn't have visual storytelling, but its main characters didn't speak like glorified Pokemon, so they kind of had an out. Not only is emotion shown incredibly well, even through a literal cube with eyes, arms, and wheels, but so does the rest of the robot cast. Eve, being an egg, you wouldn't expect to see so much emotion in her animation, and yet she is just as expressive as Wall-E. Same could be said about Mo, Otto, and most of the other robots on the Axiom. If you don't believe me, go and watch the short Bernie, yet another example of the amount of motion and emotion you can get out of some good animation. It's not just showing off characters' actions and reactions though, it's also masterfully done to show personality. I'll keep it brief, but the best example that comes to mind is around the 8 minutes mark, when Wally is staring out into the stars as a song about love plays from his speakers. From this one scene alone, you learn so much about Wally as a character. The way his eyes focus and stare up into the stars above, and the music showing his desire for romance. While I'll admit some parts aesthetically look better in Ratatouille, I adore the animation of Wally more than any other animated film out there. Maybe apart from Fantastic Mr. Fox. And also Into the Spider-Verse. Okay, wow, I love these films. You know what else is incredible, despite the lack of it? Voice acting. Not to say that there isn't voice acting, humans are just as chatty as ever, though I do like all their voices. But the best voices are, yet again, the two main characters. Ben Burt as Wally and Alyssa Knight as Eve, the latter of which is my favourite in the film. Now, while the actors themselves are great in their work, this is nowhere near what could have been their best, simply because it didn't need to be. There are very few lines that these two characters, or any of the robots for that matter, have that aren't random noises, their names, or... And yet, I don't think the voice acting could have been done much better. Wally's lines and random noises of intrigue are so innocent and cartoonish that I crack a smile every time his audio file plays. However, Eve is on a different level. There is one scene that fills me with glee so much that I get the chills oddly enough. And that's this. This doesn't sound like acting for a robot. This sounds like a human being that is so incredibly happy that they scream. And Alyssa Knight isn't even a voice actor. Not as her main role anyway. In her works around Pixar, she mainly acts as an assistant to the producer. What? I know she voices some side characters every now and again, but this one character is done so much better than so many others out there. And she barely has any lines that aren't just random robot noises! Will somebody please just hire her for another role, for God's sake? She also voiced one of the cars that were Flashing McQueen, so that's pretty funny. The last department I want to give credit to is the music department. Thomas Newman returned for the film, scoring the perfect soundtrack. Even when I hadn't watched this film for years, I could remember Define Dancing like it was the back of my hand. See? It's one of the most beautiful songs in the film, and pairing it with the visuals, you get the most beautiful scene Pixar has ever put out. I'm gonna say it again. This is cinema. Wally is just the character as a song, so of course I love it. It's goofy, it's fun, and it's got a quick tempo. And a cowbell. Just like Wally, I think. First Date is just... It makes the already sweet scene that much sweeter, and the already hilarious scene that much funnier. And finally, Fixing Wally and Static have the same eerie tune to it that carries a depressing and empty tone. Those two tracks, alongside Define Dancing, always stuck out to me when I was a kid, and they continue to stick out to me now. As do the outside song choices. The most obvious example would be Put On Your Sunday Clothes by Michael Crawford, opening the film and playing throughout the rest. The other is La Vie en Rose by Louis Armstrong. Both tracks are more old-timey, juxtaposing wonderfully with the future dystopian setting. Safe to say this is my favourite film on this entire video. If that's all you were waiting for, thanks for watching. Could you share this video on the way out? I spent a bit too much time on this. Wall-E is masterfully directed, animated, written, voiced, and just created by some of the most talented people in the industry. I see a lot of other film reviewers when talking about their favourite films say they feel it was made for them. Not literally, but metaphorically, it just checks all their boxes. This is mine. It's sci-fi, it's adorable, it's adventurous, it's beautiful, and seriously, I regret that first video. Wall-E did not cross my mind once, and I recognize that now as a sin. This film is considered a masterpiece by so many that it's even included in the United States National Film Registry, or NFR for short. What's NFR? Oh, you know, just a collection of films selected for fucking preservation based on historical, cultural, and aesthetic contributions. The only other Pixar film included in the registry is the first Toy Story, and that goes without saying. That was the first fully computer animated film. Wall-E is the only other Pixar film to make it onto that list. Good. Thank God future generations can experience this fucking masterpiece of a film. Also, Shrek is on that list, and it's funny to me that a film with a scene like this can also share a spot with
Somebody once told me.
In 2009, Pixar released Up, the story of an old man and some random-ass kid on a quest to Paradise Falls in South America. How does he get there? No, not a plane. A house with balloons sticking out of the top, which is an incredibly unique idea. It tells the story of a man learning to cope with the loss of his wife and fulfill their dream, a dream that was constantly pushed back due to drugs, alcohol, and unhealthy amounts of sex. These themes in the film inspired many who went through similar experiences. Ozzy Osbourne, Kanye West, Jeffrey Epstein, Doug Walker, and most notably, Abel Tesfaye, also known as The Weeknd. Inspired by Up, 2 years after the film was released, he dropped a mixtape called House of Balloons. Yep, that is where this bit was going all along. All that for a joke about the album House of Balloons. Do you get it? Do you fucking get it? Okay, now on to the actual review. In Up, we follow Carl Fredricksen, an old, widowed man on a journey to Paradise Falls in South America to fulfill his and his wife's dream of living next to the infamous waterfall they saw in the theater decades ago. His mode of transportation? His house, carried by a couple hundred balloons. Welcome back to the Pete Doctor Appreciation Hour. Up. That's it, that's all I need to say. The opening scene is entirely silent, save for some music and sound effects, and is still one of the best scenes Pixar has put out to this day. It's funny, beautifully animated, and fucking heartbreaking all at the same time. As it stands, this is one of the best scenes in a Pixar film, and I know I've said that a lot over the last few reviews to the point of redundancy, but it's not my fault they kept on pumping out pure gold. And of course, the rest of the film follows suit, with some beautifully executed scenes, interesting characters, great comedy, and some emotionally gut-punching parts that are made all the better due to the opening. My only big complaint with the story is with the villain. I get that it was pretty obvious who the villain was going to be, and the second he turned on the protagonist was about as surprising as paint drying, but it's the speed at which he turned on them which really got me. We learn very little of Charles Muntz as a character, except that he wants the bird, and I think a lot more could have been done to add to his character. Save for that though, the story is fantastic, as is the usual with this fucking legend. While Up has a great screenplay, I admittedly don't find it as good as WALL-E, Ratatouille, or The Incredibles. You know what it does better than all of those films though? The soundtrack. Oh my god, Mikey Boy here was just teasing me with The Incredibles, because Up has one of the best soundtracks out of any Pixar film. I seriously had never heard of Michael Giacchino until I started researching for this video. Why? He captures the adventure, the sadness, the danger, all perfectly. I'm not saying this to be a special little snowflake either. If there's one soundtrack that's praised over and over again, it's The Incredibles. But as bombastic and triumphant as that soundtrack is, I think Up does it just as well, except with more quieter and somber moments. Case in point, I like the soundtrack a lot, and there is only one other soundtrack from a Pixar film that tops it. I will talk about that a lot later though, we aren't there yet. The last thing I want to mention is the voice acting, purely because for a film with only really two main characters, a dog side character, and a villain, Up manages to have a really diverse cast. Not in race or gender or sexuality, but in age. The late, great Edward Asner voiced Carl, and was 79 at the film's release. On the opposite end of the spectrum was Jordan Nagai voicing Russell, who was 9 at the time. While both did great, I have to give props to Jordan for being a child actor that did a phenomenal job. It's safe to say that there is a stigma of having child actors, not only in the moral sense, but how well of a job they actually do, but Jordan manages to pull off a character with both incredibly funny moments and more serious moments without annoying the fuck out of me. On top of that, Carl and Russell have great chemistry, and while yes, that comes down to the writing, actors are noticeably better when they work well together. These two work well together, which makes it a crime that Russell was only in one episode of Doug Days. Regardless of the few criticisms I have, this is yet another near-perfect film. 3 in a row. Since the release of Toy Story 2 in 1999, Pixar had released 7 films, all of which have become highly acclaimed cinematic masterpieces. Except for Cars. Throughout this time, the animation improved on every single release, and after 11 years of improvement, it was time to bring the toys back to life. I find the Toy Story series to be a benchmark of sorts, showing where Pixar is up to in terms of its animation. Toy Story 1 was the first in the series, kicking off fully CGI animated features. Toy Story 2, while not really fitting this description, did have improved animation, despite the short amount of time between the two releases. Then, 11 years later, Toy Story 3 released to the world, showing how much Pixar had learned and developed over the last decade. So, how'd they do? Yeah, they did pretty great. Toy Story 3 looks fucking amazing, in some ways more than others. Just like in Toy Story 2, the characters are fluid and incredibly well animated, though I don't think they leaned into the visuals of the specific toys enough. Not to say that's not apparent in the story itself. Mr. Potato Head taking off his body parts and reapplying them to a tortilla in a breakout scene is one of the coolest things in the entire series. But in Toy Story 2, there are parts where you can really tell that Woody is a doll. Falling down the set of drawers or almost getting flung against the tarmac as a plane flies by. He's animated to be what he is, a Sheriff Woody doll, and it looks fantastic. Toy Story 3 has this, I just don't think it's done as well. They don't lean into that as much, though Woody's first escape does, and it looks great. So that's admittedly an aspect it does worse, but every other single part of the visuals is done much better. Lighting, environments, textures, cinematography, everything. This is the magnum opus of their decade of visual work. There are animated films today that still look worse than this. Boss Baby. I'm talking about the Boss Baby. If it wasn't for some incredible, dedicated, and caring animators on the team, I doubt this film would look as good as it does. Question is, does it still hold up today? Yeah. It's aged only in how hard they can go in certain aspects, and it's still very good looking today. Randy Newman returned for the soundtrack, and yeah, it's good. It's the least memorable out of the soundtracks he had done so far, and it's just kind of there, but it's good. Now, I watched this when it released in cinemas, so I was 6 at the time. God, what the fuck? That is a random memory I do have though, and even after I watched it on the big screen, I still rewatched it every now and again on the big screen, because I'm short and anything bigger than a Gen 4 iPod Touch is big enough for me. Toy Story 3 was the film I was most excited to revisit since I hadn't seen it in a long time and there was so many scenes I remembered. The opening, the breakout, the trash sand trap thing, which is why I was kind of disappointed, actually. Let's start with the good. And what a better way to start than with the overall theme, the core of Toy Story if you will. The first was about being replaced, the second was about being abandoned, and the third is about being forgotten. About no more attention being paid to you. And in a film series about walking, talking toys, I think that's a great setup for a finale. And I have to admit, at face value, this is the most interesting, because we've all been there. I don't play with my cars anymore. My teddy bear still sits on my shelf, but I don't touch the fucking thing. His name is Chef Boots, by the way, because when I got him, he had a chef's jacket, toque, boots, and by the way, do any of you remember that old online game where you could like upload your bear and play as them as like a character? Okay, I'm getting off track. And considering the kids that watched the first two films must have been approaching a similar time in their lives compared to Andy, I think this theme is perfect for both the characters and the audience. But how well is it actually explored? It's fucking great. I don't think it's as well done as Toy Story 2, but it's still really good. One aspect I do love about the cast of characters is that they shrunk them. Not like in size, but like how many there were? In Toy Story 1 and 2, there were a lot of characters to keep track of, but eBay was really popular at the time, so half of them got fucking cut. While that sounds lazy, I actually think it was a great idea. There's less side characters to write for, so we get to focus on the main cast and how they react to the situations. It's something that the next film in the franchise really messes up. More on that later though. Alright, enough pussyfooting. I have a few issues with the film's script, starting with, let's just say their inspiration. For the record, I am fully aware that everything I'm about to say isn't exactly a new opinion or anything. This film has been both criticized and praised to hell and back, but this is a video about my opinion, so I'm sorry for being myself, Dad. Anyway. I feel like a few too many liberties were taken from Toy Story 2. The best example is the villain. The Prospector is one of the best twist villains Pixar, or Disney for that matter, have ever had. To me, at least. He comes across as a genuinely nice character, and up until the third act is pretty chill with letting Woody leave. To add to that, you think he's no threat at all because he's never been out of his packaging before. All of this leads to a twist villain who, like most toys, fears not being loved. I'd say he suffers from abandonment, but he was never loved by anyone in the first place, so his motives are kind of understandable. He has a chance to be seen and loved by thousands of kids and adults alike, and he's willing to take being admired behind glass over being loved by an actual human being to get that. So, Lotso is basically the same, except a little more on the nose. His introduction presents him to be a kind and caring character, his backstory reveals that he was abandoned, yada yada yada, he's a worse Stinky Pete. The setup for the story is pretty similar as well. Toy, or in this case Toys, gets taken to the outside, Woody goes to save them, accidentally gets trapped in the car. While these limbs don't stop Toy Story 3 from being a pretty good looking bodybuilder, you can tell it borrowed a few extra parts from something better. There are a few extra similarities, but I don't see the point in talking about them because, as it stands, Toy Story 3 is still an enjoyable watch. There are a few plot contrivances here and there, the worst one being when the other toys don't believe Woody when he tells them Andy was putting them in the attic, because why the fuck wouldn't you believe him? In the first film, they don't believe Woody when he tells them that Buzz is safe, but they've realized by the end that he was telling the truth. This part works though, because at least the toys didn't trust Woody from earlier, and literally waved Buzz's fucking arm around. In Toy Story 3, they don't believe him, because otherwise they would leave and the film wouldn't happen, and it ends up making the story feel kind of forced. Now, I still like this film, I just feel a sense of deja vu whenever I watch it. It's still good, it's just not as good as the story about toys that came before it. It's still entertaining. Again, there is a prison break scene out of a daycare. How could you not have fun with that? And I'd still argue that Toy Story 3 is the second best in the series. The ending especially is what makes the third installment so memorable. It felt so final and was a really sweet scene, wrapping up the trilogy with a lovely bow. And then they made another. Regardless of all my criticism, this film is still highly praised, and most of it is deserved. It was a great way for Pixar to bring the old characters back and complete the story properly. And to show their audience exactly how much they had learned. And then, everything came crumbling down. So, that was the golden age of Pixar. And whether you like this studio or not, wow, they made some incredible films. Not only was the studio pumping out quality film after another that tugged at the viewer's heartstrings, but at times, they got close to perfecting the medium. Pixar was on a fucking roll, from Monsters Inc. to Finding Nemo to The Incredibles to Cars, not that one. All of these films not only did really well in the box office, but each and every single one was critically acclaimed in one way or another. Even Cars by some people. Pixar solidified themselves in the hearts of many. But little did we know, that would be put to the test on the 22nd of July, 2011. Because that's when they put out... You know, I didn't want to review Pixar films anyway. Yeah, roll credits. Yeah, it makes my life a hell of a lot easier. Do you know what the best part of the dark age of Pixar is? It's that, at the very least, the first film is the worst. You can just get it out of the way. Now, I'm gonna try and stay as positive as possible for this review. Probably a first on this platform. I don't know, I'm not actually that bothered to check. But I mean, wow, this film is a fucking mess. So the first thing I have to compliment is the story. Now don't get me wrong, the story is absolute shit, but I mean, it's competent sometimes. They did stitch all of the spy shit together in a way that kind of made sense. The villains are these old, rusty automobiles that break down easily. The type of cars Mater spends a lot of time with, so putting him on a spy team against those types of cars kind of makes sense. But at the same time, I also have my first complaint. How am I supposed to believe that these two are professionals when they don't even notice that Mater isn't a fucking spy? He literally tells them multiple times that he's not a spy, and they still think he's in a disguise. The spies are dumber than he is! I can kind of get it up to the point where they're on the jet, since they truly believe he is in a disguise, so I'll give them that. But on the jet is not only when he says,
Wait, you mean secret agents?
but also starts acting unprofessionally. Oh my god, it was John Lasseter the entire time, holy fuck. They don't even treat him like another member of the team, they treat him like a fucking kid. And you know what? I don't blame them, because Mater is fucking acting like one, so maybe the fact that he isn't a professional spy would be kind of fucking obvious! Deep breaths, positivity, good times. Okay, some jokes are tolerable. Mainly the pun ones, oddly enough. I hear a lot of people say that this film is painfully unfunny, and it is, but there are a few small one-liners that, at the very least, made me crack a smirk. However, while writing this script, I tried to think of one that stuck out in my head, and I can't think of any. Huh. The animation's good, I guess. Moving on. Michael Giacchino returns for the soundtrack, so safe to say the music is good at least. However, I think it's the blandest out of his soundtracks for Pixar. Not a single track sticks out in my head. No or just again, I can't remember anything. Well, okay, apart from one. You might think I'm foolish, but Weezer made this song. So, that's about it. That's all the good I can think of. I can think of a lot of negatives, though. Here, I'll just go down the list. They somehow butchered the already crap characters? The twist ending was absolutely fucking stupid. Again, how are these two spies this fucking dumb? Why would McQueen not realize that this was a bad move? Isn't he a fucking racist legend? I mean, racing legend? How are the lemon cars fast enough to catch up to clearly better, faster ones? Why is Mater, of all fucking characters, the main character in this film? Who asked for this? And who the hell is this twat? Honestly, the aspect of this film I'm most disappointed in is the fact that I kind of liked how it began. Not the spy shit, keep that crap away from me. No, what I liked was McQueen and his pit crew going on a tour around the world. They made traveling a big part of the film regardless, but the excuse was to go and try to be Johnny English, not to do, you know, racing. The obvious fucking step for not only a film about cars, but the sequel to a film where there was already cool races? Because the race in Tokyo is hands down the best scene in the entire film. Not like that was a high bar, but you get my point. I think it would have been cool to see racetracks in different countries and explore what racing means to their cultures. In fact, we do get a scene like that, and I think that scene is really tolerable. Many countries are known for their cars, so why can't we explore that? That sounds kind of interesting. The film probably still wouldn't be that good, but at the very least, it would have been better than what we actually got. What this film should have done is stayed in its fucking lane. Be a film with McQueen and Mater getting into funny antics, seeing the sights and doing some cool racing. If you want an animated spy film, go and watch Spies in Disguise. It's on Disney Plus anyway, and while it's very flawed, it's still a good time. Don't watch this shit. I think the only thing more disappointing than how bad this film is that it was clearly made for profit only. I mean, that's the main reason most films are made from the higher-ups point of view, but the fact that this film is as creatively bankrupt as it is, I get the feeling no one at Pixar actually wanted to make a sequel, but some suit, probably from Disney, forced them into it to sell some cool merch. And yeah, of course it worked. I was friends with a kid in early high school, and at his birthday party, all the decorations and presents were Cars themed. More specifically, Cars 2 themed. I hope that kid's okay. It's just such a disappointment, because I genuinely think this film could have been cool to watch at least. There would be very little substance, but we don't watch Formula 1 for the story, we watch it for the kick-ass racing. Which, for some reason, is lacking from a film literally called Cars. Fuck the breathing exercises! What's Brave doing here? Isn't that just a Disney film? Wait. What the fuck? Yeah, this is a Pixar film. Half my friends didn't think this was Pixar until they saw the poster. I remember when this film released, my two brothers were in school, but for a reason I can't remember, I wasn't, and my mum wanted to do something that day. So we went to the cinema and watched Brave. From the second the film started to the second it ended was a blur. I remember shoveling popcorn into my mouth more than the film I was watching, so I think that's a good start to the review. Brave was released in 2012 and was directed by Brenda Chapman, the first female director for a Pixar film. Until she was replaced by Mark Andrews over creative disagreements. So, off to a good start. It's also Pixar's first fairy tale film, more specifically a princess fairy tale, so surely with new ground to cover, Pixar hits it right out of the gate, right? Not exactly. Brave is the most by-the-books film that Pixar has ever released, maybe tied with The Good Dinosaur. The writing is fine, the story is fine, the animation is fine, though is it just me or does this look kind of outdated even compared to Pixar films that came before it? Look at Toy Story 3 and Brave side by side. Or Up. Or Ratatouille. I'm not crazy, right? I'm probably crazy. Even the soundtrack is, yet again, just fine, though I blame that on the drab wall of paint that is Brave more than the musician's talent. Because the soundtrack sounds good, but it doesn't hit anywhere near the same chords other Pixar soundtracks did. Fucking Cars soundtrack is more memorable than this. How? Going back to the original director real quick, what fucking creative decisions did she make that got Pixar so upset? Good ones? Something to make this film less fucking boring? And was Pixar even the one calling the shots here? I ask because Brave reeks of corporate meddling. I don't feel like I'm watching a Pixar film. I feel like I'm watching a Disney film. A very bland Disney film. Hell, if you came up to me and said that a team from Disney wrote, storyboarded, and designed Brave and all Pixar did was supply the animation, I would 100% believe you. And that's not even really to throw shade at Disney, because some Disney films fucking slap. I'll admit I don't care too much for their recent 3D animated endeavors, but even a film released the same year as Brave by Disney was more creative than this. And that film is Wreck-It Ralph. I fucking love Wreck-It Ralph. I'd rather be watching that. Now, I'm not all devoid of compliments. While the animation is the blandest since A Bug's Life, I can't deny that some aspects were incredibly well done. I love Meredith's hair and how it's animated. Fuck straight hair, give us the curls! While I'm not too fond of the main family's designs, I love the other families. They're all diverse enough and they have some really cartoony designs. In fact, the best part of the film is probably the triplets. I fucking love their antics, leading to some pretty great visual gags that made me laugh on multiple occasions. Also, the archery scene is pretty great. The cinematography especially is Pixar at its best. But that's about it. I think the big problem I have with Brave isn't that it didn't do anything new or unique, but that it just didn't do anything interesting. So while I don't think it's a bad film by any means, it's not very good either. It's just there. I genuinely forget it came from Pixar half the time. Regardless, it's very, let's say, out of character for Pixar to make a film as bland as this. Continuing the Dark Age. Also, this film was originally called The Bow and the Bear. What is it with companies changing cool names to these bland fucking titles? Did you know that The Mitchells vs. the Machines was almost called Connected? Connected? Are you fucking joking? So, this is a bit of a weird one. A sequel to Monsters Inc. had been a thought bouncing around the Pixar studio since the first film came out, as Disney owns the rights to make sequels of any and all of their films. This next part doesn't have much to do with the film itself, but while researching I came across this Wikipedia page for Circle 7 Animation, a short-lived animation division from Disney that was originally going to produce this early sequel to Monsters Inc. Pixar and Disney weren't on the best of terms at the time, with Michael Eisner, the founder of Circle 7, butting heads with Pixar over the sequel rights. Many of the Pixar staff were understandably upset that their characters were going to have as much money wrung out of them as possible. The most distraught, though, was John Lasseter, who had to announce this pretty shitty news to a studio of over 800 employees. And through tears, he reportedly said, "It's like you have these dear children. Aww. And you have to give them up to be adopted by convicted child molesters." What? I hate that I'm about to agree with Lasseter here, but I can kind of understand how upset he was. And I'm sure many of you watching this video have created something in one way or another that you hold dear. I have my animated show, for example, that I won't be advertising here, but subscribe to see that. And if I had to basically let some random fucks that had no idea what the characters were tamper with its legacy, well, yeah, I'd be crying too. Especially when you know that they don't actually care about the quality of the characters, and they only give a rat's ass about banking off it. So what I'm basically saying here is, fuck you Disney, you asshats, but also fuck you Lasseter. Wait, what was I reviewing? Oh, Monsters University, right. I have a lot to say about this film, so instead of going aspect by aspect, I'm going to go through each act and leave any other notes at the end of this review, as, well, you'll see. The first act gets a lot right. Seeing a young Mike enter the human world for the first time not only plays an important role in other scenes in the film, but is just a good scene on its own. Mike and Sully meeting for the first time was pretty funny and was a great way to reinforce Mike's fear of not being feared. The introduction of Hardscrabble was really neat too, and honestly, she has the best design in the series. The montage of Mike and Sully's daily lives in university hooks me in every time. Less because it tells us a lot of information or that it has emotional weight or that it's important to the story at all. But I mean, the soundtrack kinda slaps here. Hey, March 4th, can I use this song in my video? Here, let me check. Oh shit, really? The whole soundtrack is pretty good, to be honest. It's definitely not as memorable as the original film, but it's much better than the Cars 2 and Brave soundtrack put together. Okay, but also visually, it's pretty fun, and it lets us look into the attitudes of both characters and how they progress, which is nice. But by far, the best scene in this act is the exam. Something I'll say now, so I don't need to mention it later, Pixar nailed the lighting in this film, and this is one of the many scenes that showcases that. There's a dramatic weight that's only improved more by the darkness and— the fuck?! The entire scene feels like a judgment day for both Mike and Sully, and while I'm definitely buttering it up a bit, I still think it's well done. Honestly, the first act, while nowhere near as funny or interesting as its predecessor, is still pretty good. There were a few jokes I chuckled at, the reintroduction of the characters were interesting, even if they do retcon this line from the first film.
You've been jealous of my good looks since the 4th grade, pal.
And you get the idea that the rest of the film was going to be just as enjoyable. So then we meet Uzma Kappa. The second act of the film is boring. Mostly. I don't care for the characters of OK, I don't care for their backstories, I don't care if art has been in this random alley, I do not care for Uzma Kappa. Nor do I care about the scare games. Mostly. Again. While I don't like the idea of the scare games, seeing them all learn to work together was really satisfying to watch, and led to the team visiting Monsters Inc. in, yet again, a genuinely great scene. Seeing the team gush and nerd out about their favorite monsters, talk about the cards that they collected, it makes them all feel, well, like actual characters, which is something they haven't exactly felt like up to this point. And once again, the training montage is really well done, except it shows a hell of a lot more of the character's development. But more than that, it was a great way of showing Mike in the role of a coach. It was an interesting way to show his development, while still keeping his desire to be a scarer. Regardless of all the good that comes out of this part of the film, it is quite a drag. From the moment OK signs up to the end of the hide-and-seek game is usually the part where I lose interest. So, nearly 40 minutes of this hour-and-a-half film. And then it gets weird, because the third act has a scene that, somehow, sits up there with some of the best scenes Pixar has ever put out. It still sits at the kiddie end of the table, but the second Mike enters the human world is where this film is at its best. There is an incredibly strong emotional weight that is carried through the scene of Mike and Sully talking at the lake. Not just through the dialogue, but the gorgeous lighting as well. It's the best scene in the entire film, bar none, but I don't think it really ends there. While most videos on this film praise that lake scene, I don't see many praise the scene that comes right after, where Mike and Sully team up to scare the adults. Not only is it visually amazing, but it shows the development of the characters so fucking well, transitioning into the monsters we see in Monsters Inc. The end of the film isn't bad either, it's a neat bow to tie the story with, and it's nice to see Mike and Sully begin their career at Monsters Inc. together, leading up to the very last shot. Just like the start of the film, Mike loves being on the other side of the line on that scare floor. And now, he works there. And there's something about that makes me say, yeah, the film was okay. Okay, so, onto my notes. Randall. Why the fuck is he here? He's the most useless character in this entire film, somehow more useless than any of the Uzma Kappa members. He's here to say, hey, remember the villain of Monsters Inc? He's here, pretty cool, right? And gives him a reason to go against Mike and Sully in the first film. Except he didn't need a new reason. He already had one, and that reason was that these two co-workers were kicking his ass at their jobs. We didn't need another reason, we took a fucking guess. It's nice to hear Steve Buscemi again though. Actually, the entire voice cast is pretty good, while still being kinda forgettable. Apart from Helen Mirren as Hardscrabble, who could step on me any day. The last thing I feel I need to mention is the animation. Yeah, it's still great, surprise surprise, but I'm not a big fan of the style. The first film got a pass on this since there wasn't too much they could really do due to technology, but there is nothing about the visual style that screams, these are scary monsters. It screams, well, today is certainly lovely, isn't it? I guess that's fine though. If it did switch switch from paper mache dream balloon to infest the rat's nest, it would be a little odd to say the least, but I think Monsters University took that former idea a little too far. Nothing in the university's or world's design tells me that these are monsters, unlike in the first film. You could replace them with humans and I wouldn't bat an eye, but the animation is still good. That's expected at this point. Now, is this film as good as I've described it? Not really. This is a good film, not great, but not bad either. Just good. So why have I been so nice to it? Maybe it's because I saw this when I was young and nostalgia's a bitch. Maybe it's because the few incredible scenes this film has butters up the bad parts. Maybe it's because I just reviewed Cars 2 and Brave and I'm already tired of being fucking negative. And God knows I have a lot more negativity to get through. But I do genuinely enjoy this film, on its own and paired with Monsters Inc. While it was certainly not needed, and I much would have preferred a new idea over a sequel or prequel, I don't mind this being in Pixar's filmography. Besides, a new great film was just around the corner. Welcome back to the Pete Doctor Appreciation Hour. On this episode, Inside Out. It's pretty good! Inside Out follows Riley, an 11-year-old girl from Minnesota. How'd they fit someone in there? Who, at the flick of a switch, is shoved into a car by her parents and moved to San Francisco. Except no we don't. We actually follow her emotions. Joy, sadness, fear, anger, and disgust. And I'm not going to say what their roles are because it's in the fucking name. However, right when Riley needs her happy emotions, she and her sadness decide to Mario pipe out of there after they lose her core memories, which are basically just parts of her personality. Yet again, Pete Doctor comes out with an interesting plot with a high ceiling and a unique concept, though this one is a bit more complicated on a conceptual level than the first two, and has a few holes I'll poke through later. But for now, let's stay positive. I love the themes this film has, much like most other Pixar films, though Inside Out wears its themes on its sleeve more than any other. Not that that's a bad thing, but when the themes for the story are also the setting itself, you know it's going to be walking a tight line. And yet, it never falls off. There are technically 3 stories going on here, and while one of them is focused on a lot more than the others, they are all still connected. In some shows and films where the A and B story come together in the end, in Inside Out, one story is constantly tampering with the other. As Riley goes through her day-to-day and parts of her personality are put to the test, we see them get literally torn down in the A-plot. If Riley goes to sleep, it affects Joy and Sadness. If Joy and Sadness wake Riley up with a clown, the emotions on the other end react accordingly, therefore affecting Riley. Case in point, the story feels like it flows naturally. Not to say I love every aspect of it, there are a few plot holes that pop up every now and again, and some of the characters... Well, every time I watch this film, I'm reminded of how much I hate Joy in the first 2 acts. And I'm about to go on a tangent here, so please forgive me. Joy is just a nicer Woody from Toy Story, because just like Woody, Joy is kind of an asshole. And I've had many an argument about this, but after rewatching this film for the 24th time, I realized that I am right. Though, not as right as I first thought. Joy is a controlling asshole, and while a lot of people I've had this discussion with say that it's because Joy is literally the embodiment of happiness and just wants what's best for Riley, it's clear by the way the other emotions act that Joy isn't supposed to fucking do that. Originally, I thought it was pretty surface level, until I thought about it and realized that it's a pretty neat way of showing how Riley prioritizes always feeling happy over feeling any other emotions that help her process what's happening. So, toxic positivity. She literally does not let sadness be fucking sad, and while being hopeful is for the better, outright ignoring or trying to contain sadness leads to everything past the 25-minute mark. So, I think the filmmakers agree with me when I say, I'm right, fuck you! What was my point here? Oh, right. Joy was kind of an annoying character on my first rewatch, as I hadn't seen this film since its release back in 2014, and had forgotten the whole point of the entire thing. So seeing her ignore the rules and try to discard an integral part of how Riley as a human being works, which she should know, was a bit frustrating. But it gets a lot better on the later watches because you realize why this is happening. I mean, you could have also got that on the first watch, but I'm very slow, so shut up. Despite that though, I do honestly love the rest of the emotions. They feel very two-dimensional, having just one emotion, probably because they are just one emotion, but this is a reason, not an excuse, leading to some lines being predictable. Fear had some of the funniest visual gags, and he's voiced by Bill Hader, which is the perfect pick for the role. No, I haven't seen Barry yet. Joy and Sadness are well enough as a duo for the main plot, though Joy's entire personality literally pushes Sadness to the side, so that's not much of a surprise. But when they do work together, I get really connected to them.
Is there really another station?
Anger is funny, disgust is funny, and 2 out of the 5 main emotions have voice actors from The Office. And 1 is from Parks and Rec. Case in point, I think the characters are well written. Even Joy, I guess. The story itself is just a classic Pete Docter tale, filled with some great comedy and heavy emotional beats that bring you to tears. But not me, fuck you Pete, you aren't getting me this time! This is the first Pete Docter film I didn't cry at. It's also the last. Oh, spoilers for that part of the review, I guess. It's not that the emotional hitters weren't well done, I just didn't connect with the characters the same I connected with Mike and Sully or Carl Fredricksen. On that note though, this is my least favourite Pixar film by Pete. While it still possesses all the aspects that make a good Pixar film, I feel like it didn't hit as hard as others have. If I sound very on the fence about this, let me clear that up now. I fucking love Inside Out. It's easily the best film Pixar put out in this era, and it stands up strong on its own merits. Inside Out is stunning. Just not as stunning as many of the other films that came before and after it. God, Michael Giacchino does it again though, composing a soundtrack that is fucking enchanting. Bundle of Joy is the main theme, and it's fucking beautiful. The soft piano, the atmospheric chimes and drones, the rising synths and strings, and this little bass part around the end. This doesn't sound like an intro to a film, it sounds like an intro to a full-on masterpiece of an album. While this motif plays on multiple tracks throughout the soundtrack, every single variation of it is an outright banger. The next track, Team Building, has the motif played with an acoustic guitar as a piano swoops on your left, and quick strums of another guitar are played to the right. It's so good! Moving on from the motif, Abstract Thought is a fucking traffic jam of a track and is amazing. Drums, trumpets, and a saxophone all vibing at once, oh my god. We Can Still Stop Her sounds sad, anxiety-ridden, fucking scary. Probably all the feelings Riley was experiencing at that time in the film. The last track I want to mention is one of my favorites. Chasing Down Sadness has the same fast-paced motif I mentioned on the last track, but paired with a much more triumphant brass section. This part's my favorite. All of these songs are made all the better with accompanying visuals, especially Chasing Down Sadness. This shot looks absolutely gorgeous. Animation good, by the way. I admittedly don't vibe with all of them though, and while that's okay with a soundtrack since it's mainly supposed to be just a backdrop, many of these tracks really are there to just be that, a backdrop, so... While I don't think this is the best Pixar soundtrack, I absolutely think it's up there with Up and The Incredibles. Though... Okay, so whoever did the album art just really liked battle tapes, right? In conclusion, Inside Out is yet another great film by Pixar. I'm gonna give it a decent to strong 8 on this thing. Transition, did you love it? Did you hate it? Wait, what the fuck? Why? Why couldn't that meteor have just fucking hit? What? Let's cut the shit, alright? If you've made it this far into the video, you probably care a lot about Pixar, and have therefore seen most of their films. I don't need to tell you why The Good Dinosaur is a hot mess, because you already know. However, I also want to be fair, and will be giving an actual review, but I also understand if you couldn't give less of a crap, so if you're going to want to skip this, I have chapters directing you to the next film, Finding Dory. Before you click though, I don't blame you, and I love you. Anyway, The Good Dinosaur follows an apatosaurus dinosaur named Arlo, a small wimpy dinosaur nugget who essentially can't do shit. He can't feed the chickens, he can't climb some rocks, and he can't fucking kill a child. Coward. Joke, that is a joke. Oh, and his dad dies. That too. Following these events, Arlo follows the little man that he blames his father's death on, falls into a lake with him, and then the rest of the film happens. They eat drug berries, meet some other dino dudes, and make it back home. And it's weird, because the setup isn't that bad. It's cliche, yes, and many of the elements were ripped right out of better films. The Lion King! But there's nothing I thought was outright terrible. Hell, save for a few scenes, I found everything pretty okay. The one scene of these two showing each other what happened to their families using just drawings in the dirt is an outright amazing piece of visual storytelling. So, why does everyone, including me, dislike it so much? Well, we all have different reasons, and mine is that the second the credits began to roll, I learned what having dementia feels like. Because I forgot 3/4 of this film almost immediately. It's not that I wasn't paying attention, I watched the damn thing 4 times for this review, but I think it's a mix of having the blandest characters in any Pixar film, story beats that were done better in the films they obviously copied from, and the really fucked pacing of the story. While watching this film with my friends on a call, each and every single one of us got distracted with something else or were having conversations completely disregarding what was playing in front of us. And that's because nothing in this film was ever interesting to us. There's just nothing to really cling on to here. Arlo is a little wimp with no defining traits, Spot is just a human dog except not cute. Arlo's family are a bunch of assholes, and the rest of the side characters, they feel like they weren't supposed to be there, if that even makes sense. Like, the film was originally intended to only follow Arlo and Spot, but someone said that they needed more dialogue and new marketable characters, and so they made new marketable characters with either one basic trait that gets annoying after the first 2 lines of dialogue, are there for one reason and one reason only, or just nothing at all. And it's sad, because I feel like the story could have been really cool. The meteor misses allowing dinosaurs to grow and evolve? That's a pretty unique concept. So it's a shame that every aspect of the story is so disappointing. Maybe the script was so bad because it was in a production hell, maybe it was so bad because whoever was writing it just didn't know what they were doing. Maybe they just didn't care, which is exactly how I feel about watching The Good Dinosaur, and I hate that. You know what else is weird? The animation. On its own, it's really good, until you look more into it and, well, this might just be me again, but does something look off? The terrain is gorgeous, it's lush, it's detailed, it's bright, it's dark, it's everything I could have dreamed of from a Pixar feature that takes place in the open world. The dinosaurs look good too, they are really cartoony and each have defining features, mainly. Everyone but Libby. Arlo especially, with his legs being different from everyone else's. But you see, that first compliment is also my problem with it. The dinosaurs are cartoony, but the world is much more realistic, leading to some clashing visuals. I don't know though, that might just be me. Again, for like the 5th time this video. But again, the majority of the visuals are fucking gorgeous. Water looks superb, and light beams down from the sky in a really believable and dynamic way. Really, my only problem is the clashing visuals every now and again, all the time. The rest is fine. The soundtrack is the best aspect The Good Dinosaur has going for it. Sweeping orchestra arrangements are plentiful, and the majority of the tracks are really relaxing. Homestead gives me vibes to Brave soundtrack, having a Celtic feel to it. Fireflies is just outright beautiful and makes the scene it's in as good as it is. And the last track, Arlo Makes His Mark, sounds triumphant in all the ways it should. Other than that though, this is one of the weakest films Pixar has ever put out, even compared to Cars 2. So I'd like to end this review by asking a question. Which is worse, Cars 2 or The Good Dinosaur? The answer, to me at least, is Cars 2, since at least The Good Dinosaur had a few genuinely great scenes. But I ask because while Cars 2 is bad, The Good Dinosaur is forgettable, which I think is much, much worse than a bad film. At the very least, me and my friends can laugh at how bad Cars 2 is. We can even learn what not to do and get something out of it. But as I said before, The Good Dinosaur blends into the background, meaning there just isn't much for me to rewatch. And so, I never will. I refuse to ever think about this film again unless I absolutely have to. Lucky for me, I'll be forgetting this whole nightmare in 3, 2, 1... Wait, what was I just talking about? Anyway. Just like Monsters University, a sequel to Finding Nemo was originally going to be produced by Disney's Circle 17, which, as we know, fell through. That original story was going to follow Nemo's long-lost twin brother Remy, with Marlin being caught like Nemo was in the first film. And thank God they didn't go with that, because not only does the introduction of a long-lost brother sound like dog shit, I don't think the title Finding Marlin would work so well. Anyway, on June 17th, 2016, Finding Dory released in cinemas. And you know what? Good film. Finding Dory is the black sheep of the already black sheep family. It doesn't reach the highs of Inside Out and Coco, but it doesn't reach the catastrophic lows of Cars 2 and The Good Dinosaur. It's just kind of there, though I do think at its core it's a good film, just with a lot of asterisks. Never before has there been a Pixar film with so many fucking plot contrivances as Finding Dory. The best example is the first one that comes up in the film. Dory, Nemo, and his classmates, not Marlin, go on a field trip to see the teachers, Mr. Ray's species and family migrate. Remember, Marlin is not there. After swimming too close to the rayfish, Dory is swept in after having a flashback to her parents and gets knocked out. Marlin still isn't there, remember that? And then she wakes up. And Marlin is fucking there. How? Nemo didn't leave to get him and then come back. Mr. Ray would be a pretty shit teacher if he did. So did he leave the class with Dory? Because that's equally as shitty. So did he leave with the entire class? No, because then he dragged all of them back and kept Dory away from home. No, the story needed Marlin to be here to start the adventure, and so he's here now. Shit like this happens over and over and over and over, and stop! If you can't find a way to organically get the characters together in one scene, either change it in a way where they do, or change the story itself to allow that to happen. Last time I checked, fish don't have teleportation runes. But there is one worse aspect about this film. The journey through the Marine Life Institute is the highlight of Finding Dory. This feels like a better time than ever to mention that the environments are absolutely stunning in Finding Dory, and you get a great sense of scale throughout the second act. And you really do see most.
How can you do this park in one day, seriously?
We start in quarantine, then the halls, the warehouse, the outside. Every place we travel through is leading to one place, the aquarium. The place where Dory was born, where she grew up, where she lost her parents, and where she expects to find them again. She gets dropped in, she looks around, and she finds out...
That why you're not in quarantine?
Quarantine?
Yeah, that's where they took all the blue tanks.
She finds out that the entire fucking journey was pointless because her parents are fucking back in quarantine. Oh, but no, I can make it better. They aren't even there. They are in the ocean below the institute before they even fucking started the second act. And I hate this because it makes the entire journey feel like a waste of my goddamn time, which is the last thing you want from a film that lasts an hour and 37 minutes. The gorgeous set pieces, incredible lighting, and the entire adventure doesn't mean shit anymore because Finding Dory had 20 more minutes of screen time left and they had to do something with it. It is so disappointing. Maybe I'm bitching about it too much. Maybe it's not the destination but the journey and the friends we made along the way. But we can have a great journey and have the destination matter too. You know what though, no matter how crap it feels to reach the aquarium and realize that I've wasted my time journeying through the institute, what I will never get sick of are the friends we made along the way. This is going to be a controversial opinion I think, but I actually prefer the supporting cast in Finding Dory over the tank gang in Finding Nemo. Yet another reason for me to be murdered after this video ends. My reasoning is that the characters in Finding Dory do move the plot along, while the tank gang are just kind of there, with the only real important one being Gil. I still love the characters, but they are just funny personalities to ease Nemo into his new environment. Finding Dory has both funny characters and they move the plot along in a meaningful way. I mean, they move it towards an ultimately pointless goal, but still. Destiny is a great character, not only just because I genuinely like her personality, but also because she actually plays a part in Dory's backstory, being her childhood friend and teaching her to speak whale, which was a weird deus ex machina in the first film. Bailey is also there, and I fucking love him. The two have great and hilarious chemistry, and I don't know, I just loved the two whenever they were on screen. Fluke and Rudder admittedly don't do much for the story, but I still think they're pretty entertaining. The ongoing gag of not letting Gerald sit on the rock had me laughing every time it happened. A part of that is because I will laugh at fucking anything, but... well, okay, no, it's because I will laugh at fucking anything. At the very least, they give Marlin and Nemo a connection to Becky, acting as a literal vehicle to continue the story. The last big side character is Hank, a grumpy shithead who visually is the most entertaining character in the entire film. Seeing him jump from obstacle to obstacle looks fucking sick, and I like the connection he forms with Dory, as rushed as it feels. The only big problem I have with the character is the ending. For reasons we don't know, Hank doesn't want to return to the ocean, though we get the hint that it was something pretty traumatic. But just because he's formed a friendship with Dory, he's all like, fuck it, ocean it is? I don't know if this is just me again, but it's clear that he is absolutely terrified and has unpleasant memories of the ocean. So it would have been much nicer to see him try and get to Cleveland, and him changing his mind so quickly was weird. Regardless, I like his character. He's pretty entertaining, both visually and in his dialogue, and he even had the same reaction to me when he found out that the journey was pointless. I guess that leaves the three main returning characters, Marlin, Nemo, and of course, Dory. They're fine. I don't think any of them are as strong as they were in the first film though, and Nemo and Marlin have turned into one-note characters. Marlin is just how he was in the first film again, except that's all he is, being worried for Nemo and Dory all the time. At the start it was fine, in the middle it was annoying, and then at the end it was fine again, because Marlin's overprotectiveness leads to a really sweet final moment ending the film. Nemo for the entire runtime is just pissed at his dad for being ableist, which, okay, you know what, that's fair, but that really is his only character trait from the 20 minutes mark onwards. Finally, Dory. I love what they did with Dory. She's basically the same in this film as she was in the last. Just as funny but with less memorable moments, but the way the script treats her short-term memory loss is really well done and with the utmost respect. She's still entertaining, still has some really sad moments, and is still voiced by Ellen DeGeneres, so do with that what you will. One of my favourite moments with Dory that comes to mind is after she's told her parents have died. Morbid, I know, but the way the visuals space out and become claustrophobic really helped me connect with Dory. So, yeah, at least one of the three main characters wasn't butchered. And hey, would you look at that? Thomas Newman returned to make the soundtrack for Finding Dory, and while it's not as good as Finding Nemo, I still think he did a great job. It's nowhere near as emotional, atmospheric, or plucky, but there are still some hints of that in here. Lost at Sea is the perfect blend of mystery, loss, and sadness. Hank, Nobody's Fine, and Almost Home all have a heist vibe to them. And they are my favourite tracks in the soundtrack, the latter one especially. Finally, Quite a View was a great way to end off the film. Emotional, beautiful, and a wonderful way to tie a bow on the story. Good job, Thomas Newman. So, what do I think of this film? Because, to reiterate what I said before, there are a few highs and quite a few more lows, but the highs power over the lows, so I don't fucking know. I think I'll revisit Finding Dory every now and again, but not nearly as much as the first one, and it sure as hell won't be as memorable. Wow, pun not intended. I think the thing I hate about this film the most is how mediocre it is, yet unlike the other bad or mediocre films in this era, this was directed by Andrew Stanton. My guess is he was forced into making a sequel knowing how fucky Pixar was at the time, but I still think this is his weakest film. Wait, what's that? He co-directed A Bug's Life? Second, I think Finding Dory is his second weakest film. Fuck you, Flick. Okay, so for some reason, there's a third one? Do you remember when the Cars 3 teaser was released, where Lightning McQueen just outright fucking dies? Yeah, well, somehow that got a lot of eyes turned towards this film, and for the life of me, I don't know why. Because, well, everyone thought that was just it. That Pixar would kill off a character in one of their least dramatic, lowest rated franchises they have ever created. What was weird was that the film was more dramatic, and, well, that complicates things, because despite the weird left turn in tone and JPM, jokes per minute, this is considered the best Cars film by many. It's still not considered a very good film, but by a lot of people, it's considered the best in the franchise, and all I can think is, what the fuck? I mean, a part of me can see why. In terms of overall quality, it is the most consistent, but I'm struggling to see in terms of genre what Cars 3 is. Because Cars, as a series, is at heart a comedy. Not a very good comedy, but a comedy nonetheless. But Cars 3 has barely any jokes in it, going for a much more serious and dramatic tone, which under normal circumstances would work if the characters weren't literal cars with googly eyes slapped onto them. There are barely any jokes in here, so it's pretty understandable why most kids were left bored and most adults were left confused. Though I'll admit the lack of comedy is taken up by the theme of mentorship, which is Cars 3's strongest aspect. To be honest, a lot of my joy for this film is clouded in my respect for the writers choosing to make their story as a tribute to the character of Doc Hudson, who died before the events of Cars 2 just like his voice actor. And said tribute is done really well. We even see Doc's hometown, the friends he had there, and in the end we see Lightning McQueen take his role of mentor over Cruz, a young trainer who always dreamed of being a racer. I think my only problem with this development is how McQueen reacted to essentially babysitting Cruz the entire film, which is to say he wasn't too happy about it. He only really decides that he wants to do this after a sudden realization, and I would have preferred him to kind of enjoy coaching Cruz like Doc did in the first film. Though, to be fair, I wouldn't be too fond of looking after a character as annoying as this either. It's at this point we get to my least favourite aspect of this film: the characters. So it's weird to start off by saying that McQueen is at his most likable in this film, as much as he does end up being an actual baby boomer in the second act. The rest of the characters are where this aspect falters. Cruz is pretty obnoxious, though I admit is tolerable. She's the host of most of the jokes in the film, 3/4 of which are cringe humor, and I'm the #1 cringe humor hater, so you can guess how that worked out. Who I absolutely can't stand is Sterling. He is the blandest, most cliche, most on-the-nose capitalist scum I have ever had the displeasure of seeing. Every line out of him screams, "You are my brand," which, get this Brian, has been done to death at this point. Why couldn't you have made an actually convincing and enjoyable villain that didn't bore me whenever his name was even mentioned? Fuck! Mater isn't in the film that much, instead we see a lot more Doc. No, they didn't replace his voice actor or retcon his death, instead using archives of his voice in flashback scenes, and said before we even visit his hometown, learning a lot more about his character. I don't know how this is the most interesting part of the film, but okay. The rest of the film is... Again, it's nice to travel through some other parts of the Cars world, but I just don't know why we had to in the first place when we could have just not had another fucking Cars movie. Though, it is an improvement over Cars 2. Not like that was very fucking difficult. We get to see more racing in this entry, and I don't hate any of them. Hell, I wish there was more of it. And I'm really happy with the ending of this film. It was a nice conclusion, and a sweet way to pay tribute to Paul Newman. So, good job, I guess. You get a participation medal. Randy Newman returns, and yeah, this is a kind of weak soundtrack. After listening through the entire soundtrack, there's just nothing here that fires the serotonin off in my brain, and if it weren't for the track names, I wouldn't know where these songs even go. However, there's another soundtrack made by other artists, and I fucking hate it. Run That Race and King's Highway, I get the feeling were either chosen or made to replicate the vibe of the first race scene and travel montage scene in the first Cars film. I say this because Cars 3 references past scenes, except worse. Even that dirt track race is a shadow of its former self. They feel so fake. And also I hate the songs themselves, Run That Race especially. It's like listening to a cheese grater against my head. Or Soldier Boy. This review has been admittedly pretty odd and all over the place, and that comes down to the fact that I honestly don't know what the hell Cars 3 is. So I'll try to explain it with a quick conclusion. Cars 3 is an air film with bad characters, good themes that are explored well, and air everything else. May Paul Newman rest in peace and may the Cars series be buried in a shallow grave. So, sorry to say this, but I actually hadn't watched this film until going through Pixar's filmography for this video. Less because I didn't think it would be worth my time, more because I was busy trying and failing to make videos the year it's released. But wow, I should not have slept on this. Coco follows young musician Miguel, who accidentally travels to the land of the dead and has to reconnect with his great-great-grandfather to return home without giving up music. The film is rich with Mexican tradition, and is largely based off the traditional holiday, the Day of the Dead, and that's all I can really say about this since I am pasty white and also British. Why else do you think my teeth are so fucked up? Hey! But I can tell by the reaction this film had picked up that the representation was really well done, and yeah, I may not relate to any of this, but I still learned a lot about the culture and holiday by watching Coco, and while that sounds very white, it was a really interesting watch. That and a friend cleared it up for me. I sound like a broken record, but yet again, the story is Coco's strongest aspect. This thing is filled to the brim with themes that are all explored masterfully. The biggest is family heritage, which is the best theme going on in the script, but there's also music, chasing one's dreams, and, well, death and remembrance. I never felt like one theme overtook the other though. The family heritage is the most upfront, but while it's explored a lot more in the latter half, the second act is ironically spent running away from family heritage. And towards it. Listen, I'm not good at making my points, but you get what I mean. The journey itself though is fantastic, in part because Miguel and Hector are a great duo. I really got to know the two over the course of the film. Miguel is the best written kid character I've ever seen. He's wide-eyed and adventurous while being a bit selfish at times, not out of spite or selfishness, but because he might not understand a situation. Also, for the most part, I love his voice actor's vocals. There are a few bits I'm not fond of, but I'll get to that later. Hector is also a really likable character who has some beautiful and somber moments. Seeing him play a final song for his friend before he's forgotten is one of the best scenes in the film, at least for me. Not only is it just a genuinely sweet segment, but up to this point we'd mainly seen Hector as kind of a goofy character, and we still see that through the rest of the film, but damn, this is a sad scene. A sad scene with a great character. And then there's Dante. I love him. I love how diverse the other family members are, same with their characteristics. Imelda, Oscar and Felipe, Julio, Rosita, Abuelta, I wonder how many of those names I pronounced correctly. Despite the fact we see very little of them, they have some really interesting designs. Oscar and Felipe especially. For ones we do see more often, Hector is a really fun design and has a lot of slapstick visual comedy to him, making him one of the most interesting characters visually. Dante is similar to Hector, where he too has a lot more slapstick humor tied to his design, and I love him. He is a, whatever the fuck that word is, a Mexican hairless dog. He's pretty cool, I like him. Look at his happy face. Miguel, I'm admittedly torn over, because his design is nice. Nice visually, his movement is fluid, but he's also a little basic compared to the rest of his family. His designs especially shows this, some of which look a little off. Maybe this is what happens when you sniff too much of the cartel's Okie Coke, I don't know. Abuelita's visual design is the best representation of a character's personality, being an old and grouchy woman with a sweeter side. Her and Carl would get along well with that smile! The last character I feel needs mentioning is the title of the film herself. Coco. Despite the fact we see very little of her in the first and second act, she has one of the sweetest designs in the entire film. And the detail is wonderful. You see all the wrinkles, and I think that's great, and hold on, that sentence is really fucking weird. Considering one of the big themes in Coco is music, the soundtrack must be pretty good, right? Well, let's see. Yep, that's all the assurance I need. Actually, the official soundtrack is split into 3 discs. Disc 1 is all vocal tracks in English, well, when English is possible, and the second is disc 1 but all in Spanish, which is really neat. So the first 2 discs are good? I'll admit, these songs just aren't my thing, and I enjoy them a lot more in the context of the film than on their own, though there are a few I actually enjoy. Just know that this is a personal taste thing, because these tracks are wonderful in their own right. Everyone knows Janita is that really somber moment in the film I mentioned before, and the song itself is great. My only problem is that this is a film soundtrack, so of course you can still hear the character dialogue in the background. Kinda takes me out of the track every time I listen to it. On the opposite end of the scale is Un Poco Loco, which just fucking slaps. My favourite song on the first 2 discs, however, is Remember Me, specifically the lullaby version, sung by the character of Hector and in the second half of the song, Miguel. The song itself is great in every rendition, but the initial recording has the character of Ernesto de la Cruz singing it, and I'm not a big fan of Benjamin Bratt's vocals. The reunion version is largely sung by Miguel, and I'm not a big fan of his vocals on this rendition either, and the credits version... Remember me... I enjoy Natalia's vocals even though I have no fucking clue what she's saying. I'm sorry I don't speak Spanish. But goddamn, do I hate Miguel's vocals. The singer, not the character, that's confusing. Hell, Natalia has her own version of the song on the second disc, and it's fucking gorgeous. I'm sorry, but this guy is the worst part of the film for me, but that just speaks volumes to how great Coco is. Which leaves the lullaby version. A sweet, beautiful lullaby with some somber vocals in one of my favourite scenes in the film. The soundtrack produced by Michael Giacchino, however, is just as solid as ever, perfectly representing the vibe and themes of the film. Once again, I don't think it's anywhere near the quality of the first few soundtracks he did, but it's still damn good. Well, I guess that's it for this review. Guess I should move on to The Incredibles 2. Yeah, I'm just messing with ya. Listen, Pixar? Of course the animation is going to be fan-fucking-tastic, but it would be criminal for me to not mention how gorgeous visually this film is, at least as a footnote. It's the usual Pixar shtick, fluid character movements, interesting character designs and all, but Coco goes above and beyond in certain aspects. This is a better time than ever to explain why the video looks a bit crap. I'm basically recording all these clips through OBS, but for some reason Firefox won't play the video at full HD. The only browser that does play at full HD is Safari, but most streaming services have something in place to stop this from happening. I have the right monitors and cables, but for some reason it just won't let me. Sorry about that. Anyway, the first is the lighting. Every single shot in this film is lit beautifully. The land of the dead or the land of the living. Outside in a graveyard or inside a party. It's all gorgeous. The second is the color. Holy shit. The first shot of the land of the dead is just wow. The party scene nails the atmosphere, and the color is why it does it so well. And look at the skeletons! How are these guys still this bright and colorful? It's incredible! And finally, the world design. Yes! From the second we enter the land of the dead, Coco turns from a good-looking film to a visual spectacle. The sense of scale is amazing! The lower parts of the world, being the darkest in the entire film, is still beautiful. Just... Pixar went hard with this film, okay? Honestly, Inside Out and Coco are constantly butting heads for my favorites in this age of Pixar, but regardless, Coco is still incredible. If you haven't watched it yet, then what the hell are you even doing here? Get out of here. When The Incredibles released, it took the world by storm, placing Pixar from a respected and beloved studio with films that push the boundaries of animation and storytelling to just being God. Everyone loved The Incredibles, so everyone wanted a sequel, as did the film's director, Brad Bird. Before the premiere of Ratatouille, Brad said that he'd be open to the idea of an Incredibles sequel. And yeah, no shit, this created hype. People were excited for the next big adventure. A story that explored the super family further with new foes to face and a superpowered baby to take care of. All that hype was the first knife in the Incredibles sequel's back. When the film released on June 15th, 2018, with it came a lot of praise from some fans and a lot of backlash from others. A lot of backlash that, after rewatching this film a good 4 times over, I don't think is fully deserved. Now, I do have my complaints, but I'm gonna start off with the positives. The animation? Yes? Yes. Okay, good. Glad we're on the same page. The first Incredibles was very diverse in its art style when it hit the big screens, but admittedly that could be a bit hard to tell at times because of the older technology. The Incredibles 2 takes the visual style of 1 and puts it to work, leading to a masterfully animated feature. Each and every single action scene is fantastic. I would like to talk about all of them, but this video is getting long as hell, so I'll just gush about one. Elastigirl chasing the train is fucking sick. The high-speed chase, the explosions, the powers, but the coolest is the Elastabike. It's an electric bike that splits in half at Elastigirl's request, allowing her to use her powers in interesting ways. Like, oh, I don't know, stretching the lower half of her body back and then slamming that end back to her upper half, giving her some fucking height! Valve would be proud of these physics! There are a few of the much tame action scenes that are done well too. Jack fighting a raccoon, for example. There's nothing special, it's just Jack fighting a trash demon, but it's great. Another is near the end of the film when battling the new superheroes. It's a kaleidoscope of powers, and visually speaking, it's the most interesting fight in the film. The fight at the apartment is hard to look at, literally, because all the flashing lights probably caused epilepsy seizures in the theater. But the rest just looks great. The cinematography especially, and the sparks from the taser look fantastic. There's another great thing about the animation. While normal effects like explosions are your typical CGI affair, a few effects have a 2D effect to them. Like, say, a superhero comic? The lightning guy, for example. Seeing the strikes bounce off of Violet's shield look amazing. If anything, I wish they leaned into it more. I wish the explosions and smoke looked more cartoony. Now, are these action scenes better than the ones in The Incredibles? What? No, the fuck? Don't get me wrong, I still think it's good, but that film set up any sequel to fail no matter how many explosions they shoved into the next fight. Regardless, visually speaking, The Incredibles 2 is stunning. For the most part. There is one aspect visually that is outright not good, and that's some of the new character designs. Some designs are honestly pretty good. I like Winston's design, actually. There's nothing special about it, I just like his design. He wears a nice suit, he's great. The rest... Evelyn looks fine. Tony's redesign is a typical white teenager, but I mean, it beats 2006 typical white teenager. Then we get to the new superheroes. There is not a single good design in this new cast of characters. Not one. I guess the owl guy looks fine, but even then he doesn't look like he even fits into this world. Literally, can he turn human? Did he just hide from humans? Is this a science experiment gone wrong? What's happening? Every single new character in this room, save for the Devons, looks weird in one way or another. And sadly, the worst looking one just so happens to be the one we spend the most time with. Void. As a character, I don't hate Void. She's just a massive fangirl and that's basically her entire character. But apart from that, she's pretty inoffensive. And I love how they incorporated her powers into the action scenes she was in my favorite being Void versus Violet. It's fluid, it's fun, and it looks awesome. The character doesn't. The poor color choices make her really difficult to look at, and she just looks awkward. Like 3 different designers made their own interpretations of her and then mashed them all together into this mess. Same goes for the rest of the new superheroes, they just aren't as egregious as Narbacular Drop over here. Now, the story. Dude, I kinda like it. We start immediately where we left off from the first Incredibles, with the Parr family fighting the Underminer, and it kicks off the rest of the story wonderfully. I love the concept of the supers we saw in the first film fighting for their rights to protect others, and DevTech being introduced in the story is a really nice way of ushering that in. And it's nice to see Elastigirl do more superhero stuff. I loved her in the first film even when she wasn't doing super stuff, but when she was beating up bad guys it admittedly didn't last very long. This wasn't a problem though, because the powers are just a backdrop to the focus of the film, the family dynamic. I just wish we could have seen more of her. So The Incredibles 2 puts her character in the majority of the action scenes. Not only does it give to some incredibly well-made action scenes as I said before, but it makes sense in the story as well, since she is decidedly less destructive than Bob and are trying to change the world's perception of superheroes. This also leads to something I hate about the film. Bob! What the hell happened? They didn't completely butcher him, and he has some really sweet moments with the kids, and seeing him adjust to his new way of living and taking care of the family was fun. But for the first act of the film, he acts less like a super dad and more like a child, going against his developments in the first film. I can understand his character being jealous, but he doesn't try and hide that at all. He just sits there upset about it, sad that his wife is doing something he already did in the last film. Where? Keep crying about it! He loses the jealousy a little bit halfway through the second act after interacting with his kids more, but the only positive scene this trait led to was this playful throwaway line.
I got it. You go. Do this thing. Do it so I can do it better.
The rest of the returning characters are still pretty well written, however. The only one I have a problem with is Violet. Less her personality, more her conflict during the film. Basically, she's mad at her dad and Dickard and superheroes because she is a superhero and a boy she liked saw her without her mask on and Dickard erased his memory of her, and to be honest with you, I don't care. The writers basically just destroyed all of the development she made in the first film about gaining that confidence. I think a good sequel should introduce new problems, but it should also show the aftermath of the previous film. You know what would have been more interesting? Seeing Violet actually dating Tony, but maybe trying to hide her powers from him. Trying to hide her family's powers, maybe? I've now delved into the, well, I would have done this territory, but you get my point, right, viewer I've probably never met before? It's a bit of a waste, not only wasting screen time on an issue that ignores the first film, but on its own it's just an uninteresting part of the story. And you know what, while we're being negative, that's villain, huh? I'll admit, I like the Screenslaver. From start to finish, they're a pretty neat villain. On paper. In practice, the Screenslaver is an underwhelming villain with a cool design and some uncool, stupid motives. Oh yeah, and a stupid twist, Evelyn is the Screenslaver by the way. Her motives are that, get this, her dad wanted to call the superheroes instead of going to a safe room during a break-in, and the robbers shot him. That's the motive. It's upsetting for the characters, sure, but as Evelyn herself said, it's his own damn fault. How are the supers to blame here? Which leads to the climax of the film, the boat. This is the part of the film that divided its viewers. There were a lot of people that really liked it, and a lot of people that didn't. I was the latter, until now. After rewatching the film over the last week, I've come to enjoy the good things about this film more than the bad, and that goes for the climax scene. Because while it is a bit underwhelming, I still think it's a good scene on its own merit. It's fast-paced, it has some cool action scenes, Bob gets plunged into the depths of the ocean to manually steer the ship. I'm a little bummed that Dash got little to no opportunity to use his powers in a unique way like he did in the first film, but he still has some funny dialogue every now and again. So I guess I'll end this part of the review on that. The dialogue is easily the best aspect of the story. I somehow had more fun when the family was just talking to one another than half of the superhero stuff, and that's because of good dialogue and good delivery. I'll talk about the voice acting again in a second, but the dialogue is really well done. Except for Bob every now and again, but we've been over that already. Maybe it's because all of the characters' personalities are so vastly different, maybe it's because they're just so well written, but as boring as listening to a family talk at the dinner table sounds, in translation, it's the strongest aspect of this film's story. Coincidentally, I would say it's the strongest point of the first film too. Dialogue is one thing, but delivery is another, and The Incredibles 2 nails it. I'm not fond of Evelyn as a villain, but her voice actor almost changed that entirely. But one cast member all my friends seem to lose their shit over was the big man himself, Bob Odenkirk, aka Saul from Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul. I still haven't fully watched either, I think I got up to season 4 of Breaking Bad and kinda fell off it, but I swear I will finish it soon. After I finish this video. And all the other shows I've been watching. Yeah. But that hype isn't just because he was in one of the highest rated shows of all time, it's also because his acting was top tier. So does that translate to the animated world? Fuck Yes! Bob Odenkirk hit his character out of the ballpark with this one. His character sadly isn't written to show much emotion other than excitement and a tiny bit of anger in 2 scenes, but it's mainly just nerdy glee. However, he does a fantastic job from his first line of dialogue to his last. I really hope he gets more into voice acting. And if he does, well then, hey Bobby my man, I'm making my own show and my DMs are open, buddy. The rest of the new voice actors do a good job, but there's not many big ones I feel I need to mention. Oh wait, Dash. Yeah, he got a new voice actor. He did a good job. And then there's the music. I've typed Michael Giacchino into Spotify so much it already knows what I'm going to ask for. He did good. What, it's Michael coming back to make another incredible soundtrack. Of course it's going to sound great. What else do I need to say? The horns and brass are back, the foot tap and beats are back, and the soundtrack fucking slaps! I'll admit, some here are a bit forgettable at points, but tracks like Consider Yourself Undermined and Dig in the New Digs stick out in my memory like a sore hippocampus. A hippocampus is the part of the brain that retains memory. I was trying to make a joke, but then I realized it's called something as fucking stupid as hippocampus. Okay, look. I'm saying that it sticks out of my head. The soundtrack also gave the raccoon Jack fights a name. Rocky. Hell yes. And the end credits... Yeah, that's the Incredibles theme alright, and it's still great. This review is over 4 pages long, okay. My conclusion is that this is a very good film in some aspects and not very good in others, but at the end of the day and after multiple rewatches I've realized that it is an enjoyable film. And it gets a silver medal in the race with the first Incredibles film. The only other competitor is the LEGO Incredibles 2 game. He couldn't even make it onto the podium. So that was the dark age of Pixar. There were a few goodies, a lot of mehs, and some outright stinkers to really make you lose hope in the studio. But then, as The Incredibles 2 acted as the final nail in the coffin for some Pixar fans, they started to regain some of their quality. The last batch of films they've put out since 2019 are, at worst, passable, and at best, it's a very long stream of great ideas, interesting characters, and a new animation style since Up. So it's been a while, and what better film is there to start off this new era of Pixar than, oh for fuck's sake! Okay, so this isn't the best way to kick off the Resurgence era, but I'll take what I can get after Cars 3. So I'm going to start off with the negatives, since despite the fact I like this film, I have more negatives than I do positives, so let's just get those out of the way. Okay, problem number 1. This film's entire existence! Toy Story 3 had its share of problems, but the ending was not one of them. Not just because it was well written, but because we finally got closure after waiting for so long. I may not have existed when it released, but even I had watched Toy Story 2 at least 100 times. I was excited for another entry. And then we got it. And it was awesome. It was also the end. I don't think anyone was ever expecting another Toy Story, and why would they? The series was over. The story was complete. So why does Toy Story 4 exist? Well, from how stale the script is, I'm going to say because some Disney executives wanted a big paycheck. Making a Toy Story film is going to do that. And I guess that's a good segue onto reviewing the script. Notice that I said stale, not bad per se, but stale. Because from the plot, to the dialogue, to the characters, to the ending, to the everything, I get the impression that the writers were tasked to write a 4th film after an already perfect conclusion, meaning they have to really, really work hard to justify this thing's existence. Okay, so we get to see Bonnie struggling to make friends and settle into kindergarten. That's a pretty cool idea, and it makes sense that the toys, Woody especially, wants her to be happy. But toys aren't allowed in kindergarten. So Woody sneaks into Bonnie's bag and quietly sets the materials in front of her to make something new. A friend. Sporky. Seriously, why did they name him Forky when Sporky is right there? And then...
But for being such a brave girl, we have a surprise for you. Since school doesn't start for another week, we are going on a road trip!
That came out of nowhere. The story up until now was well paced too. We get to see the gang together again, most of which were anxious about being put into the closet. A neat touch from Toy Story 2 to Toy Story 4 is Jessie's characterization, specifically something to do with her past. We learn that Jessie went through a roller coaster of emotions. She was loved, she was forgotten, and then she was abandoned. And even before learning that, we see that Jessie has panic attacks whenever she's forced into a small place, like underneath a girl's bed or a cardboard box. We see her panic again in Toy Story 3, and yet again in Toy Story 4. After being put in the closet, she is instantly freaking out. It's a nice touch. Not nice enough to change the fact that everything after the words "we're going on a road trip" comes spiraling down. This script feels so forced. The opening is great, but it's really only there to show why Bo wasn't around for Toy Story 3. She got given to another kid, eventually finding herself in the antique store. This exact model of Bo went to this exact antique store where Woody and the rest of Andy's old toys would be going to. A bit far-fetched to say the least. At least when Bo saw Woody it kind of made sense. We learn in Toy Story 2 that Woody is actually kind of rare, but clearly Bo wasn't even worth selling on eBay. Yeah, this could mean that she just wasn't very popular, but there could also be fucking thousands of them. Why does Woody just automatically assume that this is the exact Bo Peep from Andy's house without even asking? So, to summarize, we have traveled to a random place in the middle of nowhere for no other reason than it's a road trip, as an excuse for Woody to get some mad porcelain pussy. And what? To explore a small fairground? To have some neat little action scenes? To meet new characters? Oh, the characters, right. So, there are some new characters in this film, all of which range from annoying to decent to, okay, I should hate you, but I don't for some reason. But my thoughts on them don't really matter because none of them are really that memorable in the first place. The main new entry is Forky, who I like well enough. He's not really entertaining, but some of his jokes were funny, and it was interesting to see him come to terms with the fact that he's not trash. But eventually, he comes across as just a vehicle to tell the villain about Woody so she can relate to him later in the film. Speaking of the villain, I think she's pretty good. Still the worst villain out of the quadrilogy, but good enough to get a pass from me. But holy shit, this is yet another villain who is evil due to a lack of love and attention. Stinky Pete was great, Lotso was good, but you're pushing it, and Gabby Gabby is just ridiculous at this point. Also, while searching up Gabby Gabby's name because I forgot what it was, I looked at the People Also Ask section, and is Bonnie the villain in Toy Story 4? Digital Spy's reason for this is that Andy asked Bonnie to keep good care of Woody, but she ends up not playing with him all that much, leading to the rest of Toy Story 4. Cool bro, she is 5. Anyway, Gabby Gabby has a cool little redemption thing at the end, and I wouldn't say she's even really that evil in the first place. She's just willing to do what she has to in order to get a shot at being loved. That just also requires ripping a voice box out of Woody's back. Fun. Who else? Duke Kaboom was voiced by Keanu Reeves, which was pretty cool. Ducky and Bunny were annoying sometimes, but I don't know, I kinda liked them. That scene of them beating the shit out of Margaret, yes her name is Margaret, was pretty funny, albeit repetitive. There was a cut character called Rib Tickler. That must be pretty terrifying. Oh, aww. And that's about it for the side characters I was bothered to mention. Oh, but don't worry, I can keep on complaining. New side characters being boring, I can take. What I can't stand is when the returning characters which were written so well are either completely butchered or just plain forgotten, and Toy Story 4 does both. There is admittedly only one character that I think they completely ruined, which is Buzz. You all remember Buzz, right? The charismatic, sometimes an airhead, but still pretty intelligent and brave character. That, at the very least, was above half the other toys in terms of logic. Okay, well, that's fucking gone. For the entire runtime, Buzz spends his time dicking about following his inner voice, which of course is just his voice box. Why is he doing this? He already knows he's a toy. The voice box is there to be played with, not to tell himself what to do. Well, he's doing this because Woody and him had a conversation before, where the former was saying he feels like he needs to protect Bonnie, the less his conscience wouldn't let him hear the end of it. Now, how would you expect Buzz to respond to this? A, I hear you, bud. B, keep it up, cowboy. Or C, what's an inner voice? If you guessed A or B, you should be right, but you're not. Because for some reason, the writers thought it would be a genius idea to make Buzz a fucking idiot. But I'm not entertained by this. I'm just confused on why this once smart character is now the butt of the joke for a good quarter of the film. They keep this gag up until the last few scenes as well, just why? The rest of the returning characters have a few lines each and that's about it. They add very little to the story and it's kind of just a waste. I think there's a reason Toy Story 3 cut down on its cast, because it made writing for the central toys that much easier, giving all of them a shot in the spotlight. Toy Story 4 has too many characters, both old and new, and it doesn't know what to do with the majority of them, leading to the script being a stale, boring, and tangled mess. One that I still like, however. Despite the last, 2 pages of me complaining, I do like this film's screenplay. It's not bad, it's just disappointing. I loved exploring the antique store, the fair itself was pretty cool, and you know what? I largely prefer the ending of Toy Story 3, but Woody breaking off from the entire cast was kind of a tear-jerking ending, but it also felt right. What isn't disappointing is that fucking animation! Holy shit, Pixar peaked! Everything and everyone is so fluid, special effects have never looked better, and the first scene alone is a visual spectacular. The rain, the lighting, the detail, the everything. I literally cannot explain how good this is because I'm a dumb, stupid man that does no animation, so here, just look at it. It's so good! The animation to this day has not been topped by any film, apart from Into the Spider-Verse, but honestly, that comes down to the superior style. But in terms of Pixar, unless they really experiment with their new styles that we've seen in Luca and Turning Red, this is probably going to be Pixar's peak for a long time, and I'm fine with that. Hell, if anything, this is why Pixar should experiment with new styles. I mean, when you're at the top, where else are you gonna go? That sounds like an unmotivational poster. Also, Randy Newman returns to make the soundtrack yet again, and okay, it's there. Again. Wow, that really has been his last few soundtracks, huh? Anyway, in conclusion, I get that a lot of people like this film, but I just can't get over how tired I am of another fucking Toy Story. The story itself is not interesting to me, neither are the characters or the problems they are facing. The ending was nice, seeing Woody split apart from the group. I just wish the film didn't exist. Good film, unneeded. When Onward was first announced, my brain kind of forgot it existed at the time, because, well, visually it looked like another Pixar film except blander, and plot-wise it was fantasy adventure story number 24 except there are cars now. I liked the idea, but not much else interested me. It didn't help that the voice cast was the equivalent to white bread. Tom Holland and Chris Pratt in the same animated movie? Sign me up! Safe to say I didn't really give a shit, but a few days before the UK went to isolate from that thing that happened in 2020, my girlfriend and I went to watch Onward, and you know what? It was better than I thought it would be. Let's start with that story. Onward follows a young elf boy called... hold on, let me search him up. Ian, right. Onward follows a young elf boy called Ian, a high school student suffering with confidence problems and the blandest face ever. Before Ian was even born, however, his dad passed away due to... something. I'm assuming cancer? And Ian really wishes he could have met him. His brother... hold on. His brother Barley is almost the exact opposite of Ian. He's abrasive, he's loud, he lacks any self-awareness, but he too misses his dad, only having 3 memories of him, and wishing he could have more. And on Ian's 16th birthday, the two get that chance. A wizard's staff and a gem that can bring the dead back for the day is the inciting incident, but Barley fails his deck saving throw.
Hang on! I can help!
Barley, no!
And interrupts the spell, only bringing back their dad's legs. And thus, they must quest to find another Phoenix Fire Gem before the sun sets the next day. Okay, you all walk up to a broken bridge, and there's about 20 feet of bridge missing. How do you want to get across?
Yeah. So my character, Dan Scanlon, the director and one of the writers of Onward...
Don't know why you had to tell me that all again, but okay.
...will write a script so fire the bridge will reform.
That doesn't make any sense, but for this skit I'll allow it. Roll, let's say charisma. Oh, shit, a 14? Not bad. Yeah, the bridge reforms, but watch your step. There's a few cliché goblins lurking around. Despite the characters being pretty two-dimensional, the world is where the story shines in the first half of the film. I love the mix of fantasy buildings and items mixed with modern-day technology. Some of the character designs, especially outside of elves, look a bit out of place, but I still think they nailed the designs of both the world and the people and creatures that inhabit it, creating a really unique setting for a Pixar film. Which makes it sad that there is so much missed potential. I'm gonna bring up the deleted scenes quite a bit for this review, simply because the characters and world was pretty different compared to the final product. I also love it more. Like, really love it. There isn't a single scene in Onward that really uses the fantasy and modern setting to its advantage, save for maybe the biker pixies and the character of Grecklin, but that's about it. The joke with the stepdad is that he's a centaur that never runs, but like, okay, why not explore more of that? How it's affected them? Are there any centaurs that still run like they used to? Are there any hot ones left? I'm not saying make the movie about the guy, but so much could have been explored with this setting, and we don't see much of this in the actual adventure. One of my favourite deleted scenes from the film is called Sirens. First of all, Ian is much more upfront with people, Barley is less obnoxious, and there's an extra character who I fucking love called Jenny! I know why they axed her, because the story they were trying to tell conflicted with the character. I'm just sad that it had to happen. Anyway, in this scene, Ian goes ahead ignoring the warnings of Jenny, and comes across 3 sirens that sing him and Jenny into a trap. The trap in question is fucking real estate. I laughed my ass off when I first saw this. This is the best example of the film mixing fantasy and modern settings together, and it wasn't even in the final film. There's just nothing here that warrants the fantasy element other than the magic and a few of the creatures having funny gimmicks. Yes, the pixies using giant bikes is funny, but is that all you're really going to do with it? However, there's a reason all of this amazing old material was changed. It was to accommodate for Ian and Barley's friendship, which is the focus of the film. And in this aspect, the writers did a good job. The characters themselves I don't find all too interesting, but they really do build a bond with each other in a believable way. The two have faults they overcome, they argue, they make up. Ian has that kind of sweet moment at the end of the film. It's nice. One of my favourite moments with the two is near the end, when they get a chance to talk on a giant Cheeto. That sounds weird out loud, but you don't need to know context. It's here we learn that there was a 4th, incredibly sad memory Barley had of his dad, and hearing him tell Ian something so personal shows the growth they've both had. Talking about their dad, I do love how much personality he has, even though he's just 2 legs. Disregarding the information we learn from other characters, we can tell that the dad is a goofy, chipper dude. From the way he dances, to the stupid socks he wears in the afterlife, a pair of fucking trousers shows a scary amount of personality. Now, there's a bunch of other things I could say about the film's story, but most of it is just, oh, I wish the script wasn't so bland, but I do have something to complain about. Walking across the bridge, everything seems fine. Until you step over the last brick and find yourself in the city of Asmarin, where you started your journey.
The fuck?
Yeah. Oh, and Nelly, look in your pocket.
This is the gem we've been trying to find for 3 days.
I know, right? Congratulations, guys! Fight a dragon. I won't talk about this too much since it's the same issue Finding Dory had. But the last act has Ian and Barley traveling through a sewer to their final destination, only to find that their destination is right in front of Ian's high school? This is done better than Finding Dory because at least they brought something they needed back with them, but why waste this potential? Again, this is a fantasy world. Why not have a dragon untouched and unaware of the changes to the outside world? Why not have it scared of the skyscrapers and blinking lights as it destroys everything it doesn't understand in its path? Why not kick the shit out of it? Onward is the textbook example of it's about the journey, not the destination. Except it makes the journey feel fucking pointless. You rolled a nat 1 on sticking the landing. I've been complaining a lot, but I still think this is a good film. Hell, I probably like it more than I should. The only thing I love just as much as sci-fi is fantasy, especially when you blend that with other settings and themes. So maybe that's why I'm disappointed with how bland Onward is. Last time I'll mention it, I swear, but if you at all liked Onward, I fully recommend going to check out the deleted scenes. I think the characters are more interesting, the setting is used much better, and it's a good time all around. I kinda wish this was a TV show or something. Still taking place in their world, same setting and all, but maybe Ian and Barley could have gone on misadventures throughout their town with the quest to bring magic back to the world with the help of Jenny. A bit out there, but at the very least it would be an interesting starting point. I don't know, just a thought. Anyway, conclusion. I like Onward, and it's still a massive improvement over the faults of the many Pixar films that came before it. There were some good moments, it had a great setting, albeit underutilized, and I got to make some D&D jokes, so I'm happy. If anything, I'm excited to see what Dan Scanlon is working on next. Welcome back to the Pete Doctor Appreciation Hour. What the fuck, Pete? Why'd you do that? Do you just like giving me an existential crisis every time I want to watch a great Pixar film? Is that your kink or something? Are you into that? Does that turn you on? Okay, but in all seriousness, this is one of the best Pixar films in a long, long time. In fact, it's one of my favorites. It hits me in a way no other Pixar film has, or any other film for that matter. Which is why I'm going to tell you this now. For the second time this video, if you have not watched this film, I highly recommend you go and do so before watching this review. You know the drill, Disney+, rent online, buy a DVD or Blu-ray or Discord MP4. I feel like this film is at its best when seeing it for the first time. Something I need to get off my chest right away is the soundtrack. No other Pixar soundtrack has related to and supported the story as much as Soul's does while slapping this hard, and considering how well it does both of these things, it deserves at least a mention. But I love the soundtrack so much that I'm writing an entire page instead. To me, there are two sides of the soundtrack with two distinct different sounds. The music composed by Jon Batiste is much jazzier and piano-oriented, and most of his songs are played diegetically in the film by Joe. The ones that aren't played by the character are usually playing to reflect his mood. The other half of the soundtrack was composed by Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross, both members of the band called 9 Inch Nails. Their side is a lot more synthy, atmospheric, and plays a lot more whenever something related to the Great Beyond or Great Before is happening. Now, both of these artists did a phenomenal job when creating this soundtrack. Never before has a Pixar film sounded this good in terms of its music. Let's start with Jon Batiste. I'll admit, jazz is still a genre of music I still need to get into, though it's not like I've never heard a jazz song before. Hell, one of my favorite hip-hop albums to this day is Midnight Marauders by A Tribe Called Quest, in which basically every song incorporates jazz in one way or another. My lack of a degree in jazzonomics doesn't stop me from absolutely loving Jon Batiste's tunes, however. In fact, it's gotten me more interested in jazz than ever before. This comes down to a few reasons. Batiste's contributions to the soundtrack are fucking fire for one. Bigger Than Us, Collard Greens and Cornbread Struts, Joe's Lowdown Blues, every song from Joe's jazz performance, in full, on every full release of the soundtrack, hell yes! Jon Batiste, you got yourself a new fan! Looking into the behind the scenes for the film, you can tell Jon put a lot of himself in the film, and it shows. The scene where Joe is explaining how he fell in love with jazz is basically nearly word for word taken from Batiste himself. The animators even filmed him playing the songs to not only make Joe hit the right keys, but to capture his energy as well. All in all, he does an incredible job. Then we get to Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross. This is beautiful. I love how the Great Beyond, Falling, and the Great Before all transition into the next. Speaking of Falling, I love how open yet claustrophobic it sounds, and it goes wonderfully with the visuals. The first time I watched Soul and saw this bit, I thought, wow, I really wish I could be seeing this on the big screen. Terry Time and Terry Time 2 is the peak threatening vibe from a determined being from a different dimension, and that bass in the latter is just... Alright, last two tracks I want to mention. Epiphany confuses me because on the Spotify credits it's credited by Trent and Atticus. But it's practically all piano and in the behind the scenes has Jon playing it, so I don't fucking know anymore. So I'm just gonna credit it to every single artist, which wouldn't surprise me because it's the best song on the soundtrack and sounds like the culmination of all three artists' work. And finally, Just Us. You know how there are sometimes after credit scenes at the end of a movie? That's usually why some people stay in their seats when a film ends. Fuck that. You don't need that. You just need this one single song and it's absolutely gorgeous. It's Alright is amazing, but I kinda like this one more. It's mellow, it's sweet, it's emotional, it's incredible. And all artists on this soundtrack have their own record releases. And they look beautiful. If I ever make money from this video, these are the first things I'm buying. All artists did an amazing job with the soundtrack. Such a good job, in fact, that I will go out of my way to listen to it on my way to work or home every now and again. Listening to a soundtrack like it's any other normal album is rare for me. You know what else I love about this film? You could have said anything there and you would be right, but right now I'm going to talk about the animation. Soul ties with Toy Story 4 in terms of sheer visual beauty, for the most part. Not that any of the animation is bad, there's just a huge visual change every now and again. Half the film takes place in New York City, and it looks beautiful. The color palette especially shines here. Seeing Joe enter the zone for the first time sends chills down my spine. The blues and purples spinning around him as Joe gets enveloped into that beautiful piano is the definition of enchanting. Joe's conversation with his mum always gets mentioned in other videos when talking about this film, so it wouldn't be a review of Soul if I didn't mention it myself. The whole argument, Libba is standing in this harsher orange light, but after learning and understanding Joe's perspective, she walks into the cooler blue that he was in. It's shot, written, and executed perfectly. But if there's one scene that's done better, it's... wait, no, I'll talk about that in a bit. Anyway, the other half of the animation is this. Ethereal little blobs. Now, when this film was announced, this was kind of polarizing. Everyone, including me, saw the first 50 seconds, how beautiful it looked, how colourful and fluid and gorgeous it was, and then right at the end we got a glimpse of this. Now, there are two big reasons why people didn't like this. For one, an animated black character being transformed into something else is a bit of a dick move. After reading and learning about the development, the idea about the blobs did come before an African American was chosen to be the main character, but well, I'm still waiting for the day a film does this. Spider-Verse, right! The second reason is that the entire trailer looked stunning, so seeing it cut to this at the end gave the impression that this was going to be the first 10 minutes, and this was going to be the rest. Which, yeah, that would have been disappointing if it was. Luckily for us, it wasn't. It does tiptoe on being half each, but I actually think the scenes taking place in the real world overtake those in the afterlife. Or before life. Not life. Half-life? And the scenes that do take place in not life still look great. Just like many other human beings that drink water, I too think the counselors look fucking sick. They're based off these funky wire sculptures, they're beautiful. Oh, but Terry. I love Terry searching for Joe in the real world. Seeing them maneuver around buildings, heart monitors, graffiti, it makes Terry one of the most interesting characters to follow in the film from the visuals alone. The souls, however, are admittedly less interesting, but I get why. Unborn souls are made to look like blank canvases, and you know what? They're pretty adorable. On the opposite end are the dead souls, who I still kinda like. They all have similar faces and even accessories to before they died, and it's a really nice way of differentiating them. Apart from cats don't get shit. So yeah, overall, the visuals are gorgeous. To this day, I'm still trying to decide which looks better, Toy Story 4 or Soul. Either would be a fair winner though, so I'll leave it at that. Voice acting is solid. Might as well get that out the way since while I do think it's great, most other aspects of this film are so good that they kind of overtake it. However, you may want to get out your hammer because, well, Jamie Foxx's Joe fucking nails it. He lands his lines perfectly. I'm gonna be honest, I think Mr. Fox over here is one of the best voice actors Pixar has ever had. But get that hammer out again because Tina Fey's 22 fucking nails it! She has some amazing energy and brings so much character to the character. Yes. Graham Norton as Moonwind was an interesting choice, and yep, he fucking nails it! Felicia Rashad as Libba, nails it. Donnell Rawlings as Des, nails it. Angela Bassett as Dorothea Williams, nails it. All of the Jerrys, nails them. Rochelle House as Terry, nails it. I just built a fucking treehouse out of all these voice actors and nails. And then there's my favorite part of the film. The writing. A quick FYI for the rest of this review. This film's message hit me like a bag of rocks, and if I don't talk about it, I honestly don't think this would be a full review. I don't think the theme of Soul hit everyone the same it did me anyway, so at the very least you can get my perspective. Anyway, here's the plot. Joe Gardner is a jazz pianist and music teacher with a dream to play full gigs as his career. Just as the school he's working at offers him full-time employment, Joe gets the opportunity he's been waiting for all his life. A chance to play with renowned jazz player Dorothea Williams. And he gets it! He excitedly exits the jazz club, making his way down the street while talking on the phone, and right as he narrowly avoids death, he fucking dies. Joe finds himself on a conveyor belt, heading towards a giant white ball in the distance. Some old folk explain the situation. You're dead, bro. Unhappy with this, Joe jumps away from the conveyor belt, down through the strings of the universe, and into the U Seminar, where new souls are created and given personalities. In the new U Seminar, Joe is tasked with getting a mischievous and nihilistic soul called 22 her Earth Pass, which allows her to live her life. Joe, eager to get back to Earth, however, wants the pass for himself, a concept 22 is fine with as she isn't exactly Earth's biggest fan. After nothing sparks 22, however, she has a new idea, to talk to an ethereal traveler called Moonwind in attempts to get Joe back into his body, which works. Kind of. 22 accidentally goes with him, putting 22 in Joe's body and punting the soul out of a cat, which is an incredibly morbid and hilarious joke that I lost my shit at on my first, second, and third watch. With Joe stuck in the wrong body and 22 stuck in any body, they escape the hospital to find Moonwind and reverse things. What follows is a beautiful perspective on life and living and purpose, and okay, so 22 at first fucking hates being in a body, and yeah, her first impressions sucked. The world is loud, crowded, and claustrophobic, and it causes her to panic and sit in a corner until Joe just up and dies. That is, until a monumental, life-changing event happened. Something that changes 22's perspective on everything. She tries a slice of pizza. And you know, I set that up as a joke, but this is arguably one of the most important scenes in the entire film, considering this tiny thing is what encourages 22 to continue on. Throughout the rest of the film, 22 experiences things she couldn't have before being on Earth. She acts like a kid exploring the world, hearing new music, trying different foods and talking to new people, learning about their lives. The barber scene is one of the 3 standout scenes in Soul. Not only is it executed perfectly, but it's also a great representation of the 2 big themes in the story: a spark versus a purpose. For basically the entire runtime, Joe calls being a jazz pianist his purpose. He centered his whole life around it, making it one of the few things he ever talks about. On the other end is 22, a soul struggling to find her spark. A lack of what she and Joe confuse to be a purpose. However, since she lacks this, her time on Earth interacting with others isn't filled with a single aspect of Joe's life. While all Joe does is talk about jazz, 22 talks to Des about his life. How he wanted to be a veterinarian, but changed because veterinarian school was too expensive for him to also care for his sick daughter. But despite how much this sucks for Des as a character, he says it with a smile on his face, enjoying the job at the barbershop because of the people he gets to meet and talk to there. At the same time, 22 is also learning what it's like to be part of a community, something she's clearly pretty good at. However, there's one scene in this film that I think is a contender for an all-time best, and that scene is called Epiphany. Now, here's something about Joe. After he died, we get to see his life as a collection of different memories, most of which were sad memories of rejection and failure in the pursuit of playing jazz as a career, and he concludes that,
"My life was meaningless."
Which, like, that fucking hits. Hits me at least, especially because I relate to why Joe feels this way. The big foreshadowing line at the start of the film is,
"I would die a happy man if I could perform with Dorothea Williams."
This gig, or any gig like this, would complete him. At least that's how he feels as he repeats ad nauseum about his life quote-unquote finally starting, about how playing piano is his life's purpose. It's why I think the second act works as well as it does, because we see 22 with the opposite mentality. While Joe has a want, 22 goes with the flow and experiences life, finding the joy in the smaller things. Near the end of the second act, the two have a kind of heart-to-heart, and my favourite line from it is this one.
"Maybe skywatching can be my spark, or walking. I'm really good at walking."
Which Joe dismisses.
"Those really aren't purposes, 22. That's just regular old living."
He doesn't think life is worth living without his oh-so-precious purpose, a concept that is later shot down like it was obvious by the universe itself.
"Oh, you mentors and your passions, your purposes, your meanings of life."
But even then, he still believes that jazz is what he was born to do. So, he plays the show, and just from the way he's animated, you can tell he's having the time of his life. Seeing the heavy breathing and sweat on his face after the show concludes tells you everything you need to know about how he's feeling. Until he gets outside, and he stands there lost. Joe feels like he should feel different, but his day continues just like any other, taking the subway home like he has every other day. He gets home, sits down, clears his pockets, and plays the piano. After thinking about his last day, and then his entire life, Joe comes to his own conclusion that your purpose is not the same thing as your life. You don't need one to live. It's the small things that make life worth living. They even bring back a memory we saw before, a memory of Joe eating pie, or cake, or whatever that is. Originally, this was seen as a sad part of his life, but it's now recontextualized to be a highlight. Sitting down, in a cafe, enjoying some good food. A very small moment, but a nice one. This scene has me in fucking tears every time I watch it, and I can't pinpoint why. Maybe it's because it's wonderfully presented. Maybe it's because the story up to this point feels like it was building up to this conclusion and it just hit all the right beats. Maybe it's because I feel like I too have spent too much time focusing on what I feel like I was meant to do in life, but also have had a fear about when I succeed, what I will do after. Maybe it's because the feeling that I'm wasting my time on this earth when there's something else I could be doing sometimes keeps me up at night. Maybe it's because the piano's pretty sick, I don't know. What are you, a cop? But Epiphany is my favorite scene out of any Pixar film. I know that's probably a very unpopular opinion, and considering the other incredible scenes this studio has put out, probably a dumb one, but I don't care. This scene is a masterpiece, and it gets me every time. I know there are problems with this script. Soul has more plot holes than any other Pete Docter film. The way the great before and after works is kind of weird, and they commit a crime worse than murder. They have fucking cutaway gags. The only redeeming quality of them is that each and every single one was pretty funny and played a role later in the film. I will gladly push aside what this film does wrong though because of how much it does right. In my personal opinion, this is one of the best Pixar films since Up, and is one of my all-time favorite films. Thank you, Pete. Maybe don't give me an existential crisis next time though, yeah? Soul was Pixar's best film in a good while, but it also felt like a magnum opus in a way. The writing had the heavy and deep theme seen in their past releases, and more than that, the animation seemed to have peaked with its more realistic side. Can we quickly put up a comparison with Soul and Toy Story for shits and giggles? Nice, okay. So, after making a story as thought-provoking, as good-looking, and as well-made as Soul, where else are you gonna go? I didn't know Italy had a different texture pack. Luca has the biggest visual change in Pixar's history, going for a much more cartoony, watercolor pastel look. Remember when I was talking about Ratatouille and said that the humans look like 2D characters transitioned into 3D? Well, Luca looks like 2D characters were just put into a CGI software, and it is a welcome change. This film is absolutely gorgeous. I love the character designs, the transformation from sea monsters to human, the lip sync. Look at this looks great! The town and the environments feel so cozy and friendly. I want to go here in real life. The food, oh my god. I really want to try and learn to make trinita al pesto. It looks amazing in the film and on Google Images, and I can't cook. I'm hungry. I should go make a sandwich. It's not just the animation that's drastically different from any other film though. Think of the best Pixar stories. Monsters Inc. Two monsters try to get a human girl back home without getting caught, lest they be banished. The Incredibles. A superhero wishing to go back to the glory days gets him and his family into trouble. Soul. A man living with regrets from his life dies, but is desperate to return to Earth and literally traverses the universe to get back to his body. Luca. Two kids that are also fish people want to win money for a Vespa. Well, that's all I needed to hear. God, I really love this story though. It's simple, but it's also fun. It's easygoing, but it's not scared to have some sad moments. The fact that Alberto was alone on the island for so long at such a young age is pretty dark, but on rewatch it makes the first act that much sweeter, as you see him develop a really nice friendship with Luca. Hell, that's what I describe the overall tone of this film as. Sweet. A nice coming-of-age tale that apparently is pretty similar to Call Me By Your Name, but I haven't actually watched that yet, so no comment. When I said Cars was like a comfort film, I said it was one of the best so long as you turn your brain off. If you want to keep that bad boy running though, Luca easily takes the spot. Not just because of how mellow it is, but it's also just a bunch of fun. On my first watch, I had this stupid smile on my face the entire time, apart from the ending, which of course I teared up at. While previous Pixar films tried to get me to think, one of them succeeding in a way I never expected, Luca knocks on my door with a box of Oreos and says, "Hey, wanna listen to Sanctuary by Sunk Mountains with me?" But then we end up playing Monopoly or something. Look, I don't know where this metaphor is going, to be honest with you. But watching Luca and Alberto building their own Vespa for hours on end made me feel nostalgic as hell, harkening back to when me and the other kids on my street would just mess around in the afternoon. If there's any part of the film that does falter, I'd say it's the final act. I don't see why Luca and Julia didn't team back up, and the town known for killing fish monsters was way too quick in accepting Luca and Alberto. You know, if they were in redneck country, they'd be... Regardless, I had a lot of fun with the story, and that ending was... it got me. Hook, line, and sinking in my own tears. Alright, it's that time of the review. The soundtrack is amazing. Again, how are they doing this so often? The soundtrack was composed by Dan Romer, and it captures the spirit of Luca perfectly. I love the quick tempo and plucky guitar and strings of Meets Luca. Did You Hide sounds like the musical version of Curiosity itself, just like how Walking is just like Swimming sounds like the musical version of Discovery. Every part of the soundtrack sounds as if like childlike wonder was put into a film score, which, well, it basically is. I hope Pixar hires Dan again, he did a phenomenal job. I think Pixar needed a film like Luca, after having a run of films that were either great but so packed with ideas that it could feel like too much, mediocre enough to fly under the radar, or just outright terrible. Luca is none of these. And I hope we get other films by Pixar that's as easygoing, sweet, well-written, and fun as Luca is. I'd love to see more animation styles too. Seriously, Luca looks gorgeous and is an incredibly refreshing change. How is this not shown in cinemas? Oh wait, yeah, the virus is killing people, right? Oh no. Oh no, 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 no. This is terrible. This is awful. This is worse than the events of World War II or Justin Bieber releasing a new album. Turning Red tackles puberty? Yuck, get that normie shit that every person goes through in their lives out of here. Turning Red follows a young Chinese girl called May, who one night wakes up as a red panda because of a curse from her ancestors. Through the rest of the film, she has to learn to control it, contain it, and... Just kidding, she uses this neat party trick to score tickets to a concert. Respect. The film follows themes of growing up, generational trauma, and puberty. I'm just joking about that last one. Puberty has nothing to do with this film. I just wanted to scare the parents that were bitching about their kids learning what periods are. Okay, so puberty is also one of the big themes, and for some weird reason this is a hot take, but I think it's done really well. If there's anything to love about Turning Red, it's how honest it is. Don't get me wrong, I think exploring a theme in a metaphorical way is way cooler, which Turning Red does have. But it's also nice for the film to go periods, am I right, without feeling like it's talking down to its audience. On top of that, the themes are just explored well. May's reaction to the panda for the first time felt pretty accurate to how I felt at the god-awful age of 13, and age 14, and 15, 16, 17, 18. Like a big, gross, smelly... I wouldn't say panda, because pandas are pretty cute. I felt more like a slug. I've heard from a few of my friends that they related to May doodling under the bed. My response, of course, being, you guys are a bunch of freaks. But I think that, plus the countless other times this film gave me a flashback to the worst time of my fucking life, is good enough proof of how down-to-earth and relatable the film is. The generational trauma was done in a really interesting way, too. Not only from May's rebellious adolescence, but also May's mum. Dude, that final scene with May and a young Ming was brutal. I really related to both May and Ming not feeling good enough for their respective parents. I mean, my parents weren't even strict, they didn't expect perfect anythings, but that didn't stop me from feeling like I wasn't good enough. Damn, I'm sad. If I had to complain at all about the story, it would be that despite how upfront they are about heavy topics, I feel like they could have gone much deeper into some of their themes. Turning Red and that Big Hero 6 short was a step in the right direction for Disney, but I want to see a full film where they tackle puberty like this. As much as some weird-ass parents are going to complain about it, teaching kids, especially ones getting to that point in their lives, what all this stuff is, and telling them that it's normal is important. Very fucking important. Finally, do you remember when I said Miguel from Coco was the best written kid character I'd ever seen? Well, that was before I saw Turning Red, because Mei Lee is the best written kid character I've seen in an animated film. They perfectly captured the wonder, the awkwardness, and all the cringy shit teenagers do. Hell, because the film has the guts to be a lot more honest with its audience, they get to treat Mei like an actual teenager. One of the biggest reasons I see parents raging at this film is that they think it teaches kids to disrespect their parents, but like, no? What the hell are you talking about? Did you just forget what being a teenager was like? Because not wanting to do every single tiny thing your parents tell you to do is pretty normal. I'm gonna repeat what many of these reviewers said. If you bitched about May disobeying her mother and how it was disrespectful, you are probably the mother in this film, and she becomes menopause Godzilla by the end, having a temper tantrum over her daughter wanting to make her own decisions. In that respect though, Turning Red nailed it. Seeing her break away from her parents' wishes one single time to experience her first concert was well written and paced. Case in point, they did an amazing job with the writing. Turning Red has a pretty similar animation style to Luca, much more cartoony than any other Pixar release. That's right, Cars is more realistic. So I'm not going to retread that ground. It's nice, it's fluid, it's unique, you get it. Though admittedly, I don't like it as much as Luca. Let me say now that yes, the animation in Turning Red is still amazing. However, some parts of Luca's visuals went hard, like the transformation, the environments, and the lighting. Turning Red feels a lot more refined, but some of that neat experimentation is lost. It's much more grounded, but it loses a bit of its quirkier side. Not to say the animation isn't quirky, if any film would use the word quirky, it would be Turning Red, but look, I just think the animation was more interesting in Luca, okay? Stop busting my balls! However, the animation is obviously still amazing in Turning Red. And I'd love to see this style again, but first, I want to see them experiment with other styles, and I mean I want to see some wacky ass shit. And that's it? That's the end? Damn. What an amazing filmography. Yeah, Pixar did have a rocky middle, but even then they had a few great highlights. And with their last 3 films, Soul, Luca, and Turning Red, Pixar has really been picking up their slack, and personally, I can't wait for the future of the studio. Not many new films have been announced, and the ones that have don't actually have too much information on them. Except for one. On May 16th, 2021, Pixar announced Elemental, the story of a fiery young girl and a go-with-the-flow guy learning what they have in common. And judging by the concept art, it looks really interesting. I wonder who the director's gonna be. Oh, fuck! But I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. A lot of production hell was attached to that film, so maybe things will be different this time. And I love the story's concept. I'm really interested in what the animation's gonna look like. Are we getting a new art style to accommodate for the fact that the characters are basically just glorified special effects? Or nothing like that at all? I know one of the big things I didn't like about The Good Dinosaur was the animation, but still, at the very least it will be interesting. Elemental releases on June 16th, 2023, so of course, I'll review it once it comes out. Well, I think that's it for this episode. It's been a long one, and I put a lot of effort into this video, but I really love how it turned out. But don't worry, I have plenty of other studios to talk about in the future, especially in animation. Sony, Illumination, Aardman, Studio Ghibli, which, by the way, I actually have not watched a single Studio Ghibli film, and I am very, very sorry about that. Thank you for watching this video. Leave a like, subscribe, and if you can, share this video around with anyone you think might like it. I spent a bit too much time making this video, to be honest with you. That's all from me. See you next episode. Fuck! Right, so Lightyear released about a month back now, and I went to go see it in cinemas. And it was there. When Lightyear was announced, people lost their fucking minds. Everyone was hyped. Everyone was talking about it. The animation looked amazing. They used David Bowie's Starman, and there was a robot cat, yes! A few more trailers later only built more hype. Finally, Lightyear released on the 17th of June, and the general response was not great. In fact, I checked IMDb the day it released since I couldn't go to see it, just to see what the rating was. It was a 5.2. I thought, okay, so maybe it's just the early nihilistic reviewers. This is the lowest rated Pixar film, which just can't be true. It'll probably pick up its pace the next day. It went down? It did eventually go back up to a 5.3, but okay, so here's the thing. Cars 2 is universally panned as not only the worst Pixar film, but just a generally terrible film. 9 out of 10 reviewers on YouTube tear this thing to shreds every time they hear the words Cars and 2 together. Despite all that hate though, Cars 2 has a 6.2 on IMDb, which is way too high for that fucking thing. Now, who saw Lightyear? Raise your hand. Whoever raised their hands in real life is a fucking loser, but regardless, which film did you think was worse? Cars 2 or Lightyear? It's Cars 2. Cars 2 is worse, and yet Lightyear has a full star lower rating. Anyway, I should probably start talking about the actual film now. Lightyear follows Buzz Lightyear, not the toy, but the character the toy was based off. The film starts by saying this is the film Andy saw in 1402 or something dumb like that, and we finally get to see what the film's plot is. So Buzz crashes this giant ship filled with tons of different people for a mission and needs to run some experiments in order to get everyone home. These experiments, however, take 4 years of the planet's time, while it takes Buzz only 10 minutes or 4 minutes, or again, I kinda forgot. So he keeps on trying, and he sees his co-workers and his best friends' lives fast forward, which is by far the best part of the film. Also, yes, the gay kiss was cute, and yes, many homophobes bitched about it way too much, especially you, Ben Shapiro, calm your tits. It was a tiny kiss. How many of you fucking morons didn't realize that Love, Simon also released in theaters? Hey there everyone, Future Jack here. First of all, I'm editing and rendering this video before Lightyear comes out on Disney+. That's why I'm using the clips released on their YouTube channel so far. And also, while searching on YouTube for a high quality version of the gay kiss, I ran into way too many videos of people being really fucking weird homophobic morons. I love the one specifically where they bring up that Chris Evans calls the bigots idiots, so they call themselves proud idiots. You guys are morons, and you're fucking admitting it! Let's laugh at a few of these comments, and of course, feel free to pause the video at any time if you just need a breather. If you are a homophobe, transphobe, ableist, racist, or any other all-around dickhead, I want you to know these 3 things. You're a moron, you probably have no bitches, and thanks for the watch time, fuckface. Then his friends die and his new commander shuts down the tests and he does it anyway, and then when he gets back he finds that robots from an alien ship have attacked. He gets a team, they fuck up again, this is so boring, they go to the Zerg ship, turns out Zerg is his father, which, wait, no, it's him from the future. But also not the future from a different future? What? And then they destroy the ship and the crew gets arrested, but then they're promoted and the credits roll and wait, I still have half my popcorn left. That's surprising. Once again, there's a lot I missed out for convenience's sake, but this isn't a story. This is just a bunch of things happening. The script felt incredibly messy, empty, and like a whole act was missing. The characters were uninteresting, the dialogue felt awkward and unrefined, the jokes either weren't funny or simply didn't land well because the tone conflicted with it. The animation was a mix of stunning and confusing. Stunning because everything looks great. Characters look nice and their expressions are amazing, but there are a few design choices I don't understand, most of which tie into the story. Despite the fact that Lightyear is a hell of a lot more dramatic in tone than any other Pixar film, Lightyear is still a comedy. The characters still try to make jokes. There are still visual gags every so often, and there is a robot cat that is not taken seriously at all. Despite this, the animation looks incredibly dark and gritty, at least compared to the story they were telling. It makes the two aspects of the film feel really disconnected and just feel wrong. The best example I can think of is Buzz's iconic suit. In the original Toy Story, Buzz's character design popped out among the other toys, especially against Woody's. Not only was this because he was kind of an antagonist to Woody, but because, I mean, look at him, he looks awesome! A good chunk of Andy's toys use browns, yellows, and whites, while Buzz uses more lighter colors, greens, purples, even a combination of black and white. Not only does he look cool, but he sticks out among the other toys. He's new, he's from space, and he's Woody's antagonist. This is why Buzz was designed like that. This does not work in Lightyear. Even when the suit looks way grittier than it does in the original Toy Story, it still looks way too bright in this. It wouldn't even be that bad if the story and the animation wasn't so gritty, but it is, so just change the damn suit! The music is pretty forgettable. In fact, I think it's the most forgettable of Michael Giacchino's work for Pixar. Which made me realize something: every bland film this guy does a soundtrack for, the soundtrack ends up being forgettable too. Yet every time this guy is given a banger script, he makes a soundtrack so damn good that I can't help but jam to it. So, Pixar, stop wasting this guy's talents, yeah? Okay now... Oh shit, it's temper tantrum time! What the fuck are these side characters and why are they so fucking bland? Why is the pacing switching between breakneck speeds and that's if I'm thinking of ending things? Which I love, by the way, I'm just using that film as an example. The jokes that are in this film aren't even that funny, and oh fuck you, Zurg. In Toy Story 2, there was this small throwaway joke.
No, Buzz. I am your father.
Which was basically the writer's way of saying that Star Wars was really in that year. But now that Lightyear solidified its place in the Toy Story universe as canon, it needs to stay accurate. So what the hell happened here? Because Zurg isn't Buzz's dad. It's himself from the future. How did he get the ship and the evil robots? You're gonna laugh at this. He found it. You know, floating there, in the middle of uncharted space, no owners and a warehouse full of evil robots. How fucking convenient! But at least his motivation is good, right? Kind of, admittedly. Zuz, that's what I'm calling Zurg Buzz now by the way, wants to go back in time to stop the ship from crashing. Or at least I think that's what he said, I don't know, I'm not paying for another ticket to find out. But Buzz doesn't want to go back because his best partner in crime had a life there. She got married, she had a kid who grew up and then had grandkids, one of which was the main character we follow, Izzy Hawthorne. Now, I think that's fair to be honest, except hold on, are we just going to ignore the thousands of other people in the ship that miss their fucking families? Did they not get to see their families again at all? Do they not matter? And yeah, I get it. Buzz has formed a connection with Izzy at this point, but if Alicia can have a family on a planet filled with vines, I'm sure she can find someone on Earth. And I think this would have been much more interesting too. I think Buzz having to sacrifice one timeline for a better one where the past and future gets to thrive on Earth and live their full lives would be much more interesting. Maybe Alicia and her wife could have still gotten together as well. I mean, why not, right? Maybe Buzz could have introduced the two. And also, real quick, the vines that kept on snatching the souls of innocent children are just never really talked about. We don't learn where they come from, why they're sentient, or basically just any information about them. And they keep on popping up for some reason. Will they just stop killing me with this script, please? Last but not, the characters. Izzy is fine, the only cool part of Mo Morrison was that he was voiced by Taika Waititi, Darby Steele was incredibly basic, and Socks? Alright, I like Socks. He's by far the best part of the film. He's entertaining, he has some good dialogue, and honestly, he's just a good and likable character. And finally, Buzz. He is the most boring, most predictable, most one-note, white bread character in this entire film. Following Buzz was about as interesting as befriending the wind, and about as sad too. I thought Toy Story 4 did Buzz dirty, but this is fucked. Lightyear is a disappointment, which really bugs me because this part of the review is supposed to be Pixar's big comeback. And for the most part, it has been. I'm just really hoping that Lightyear is nothing but a slip-up in an otherwise amazing return, because it has been amazing. Pixar has been rekindling a love many once had for the studio, including me. Soul, Luca, and Turning Red are all fantastic films that played with unique story ideas, interesting characters, and a voice cast that just works. Pixar has been one of my favourite studios for a long, long time, and it's so nice to see them finally getting their footing again. And personally, I can't wait to see what they make next. Thank you for watching this episode of Film Torch of Me. I hope you liked it.
Taught me wrong from right. I was born in the South. Sometimes I have a big mouth when I see something that I don't like. I gotta say it. We've been driving this road for a mighty long time, paying no mind to the side. Well, this neighborhood changed. It's all been rearranged. We left that dream somewhere behind.
Ugh, that tasted terrible. The last thing I want to think about is food. What? Yeah. Oh, and Nelly, look in your pocket.
Whoa. What the fuck?
Where did you get a gun from?
I don't know.
Oh, you're gay! That explains so much! That's why you never slept with me! This is some good TV.